Good morning, everyone. I will call the Electoral Area Services Committee for Monday, February 7th to order. I'd like to acknowledge we're meeting on the unceded and traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. First up on the agenda is a public input for the financial plan. I will turn it over to staff to hear if we've got any. Second, and over to staff. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And at this time, there is no public input to share with you with respect to the budgets, but we encourage the public to provide that input. Also to view our website where all the information pertaining to the various budgets of the EASC and other services of the regional district are available for their information and input.
One question from Director Arwood.
Thank you. And when you say there at this time there is no input, you mean we haven't received input from the public so far on the budget? I know people talk about it on Facebook and that doesn't quite qualify. So what is the formal way for people to provide that input?
Through correspondence, an email to the CVRD, to the regional district, that anything that we receive in writing, we will place on the agenda and provide to you as feedback or input. You're correct. Commentary on Facebook or other chats is not something that we delve into and provide or bring forward. The best way is either to be a delegation or to send a letter in writing to the regional district with respect to input on the budget.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? Hearing and seeing none on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Oh, I guess we can do the in-person. I'll switch that around. We'll move on to the 2022-2026 proposed financial plan for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
So the first is, we're reviewing the planning services function budget today, and Alana Mullally and Ton True are here to present this for you, and I'll pass it on to Alana.
I think we just skipped Kevin's.
So Kevin's feeling really good. Yeah, sorry, Kevin. Are you there online? Sorry, I didn't catch you there, Kevin. I'm jumping one ahead. So back to the proposed financial plan budget presentations and Kevin Duval.
Thank you very much, Russell. No worries. Through the chair to the directors. No, just a quick update. So of course, this is meeting number 2 for the Electoral Area Services Committee with respect to the budget rollout. Certainly have the dashboard. I mean, I can certainly put it up just so that people can kind of see where, and apparently I can't share my screen right now. So basically, yeah, we're in meeting 2. We do have a couple of more meetings coming up, one being scheduled for February the 14th, and then a 4th one scheduled on the 28th. And then, post that, anything that, does need to come back at the request of the directors, we would have one more opportunity into March to bring those back further. We are continuing to look at the schedule for the next 2 up and coming meetings, just given some delegation requests and whatnot. So we'll be jiggling of things around a little bit, but we'll certainly keep the directors apprised as we move forward with that. And Lisa says I can now share my screen, so bear with me.
I think you're co-host now, so try again, Kevin. Yeah.
There we be. So yes, so you should see the dashboard there. And as you can see, we have carried over the planning service as the CAO referred to over to today's meeting. And then we have about 6 total presentations for you today to put forward some various budgets. So I'll leave it at that and turn it back to Russell.
Great. Any questions from the directors? Okay, hearing and seeing none on receipt then. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. And item number 2, the 2022-2026 financial plan for planning services functions 500 to 503. Moved and seconded.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. I'm so anxious to see the planning budget, and now it is on to Alana and Ton to present this.
Thanks. Welcome, Alana.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Russell. Thanks very much, Chair Hamir. Together, as Russell said, together with Ton True, I'm here to present the planning budget, the planning service budget, and I believe that Brian Pearson is also online to speak to you today about the GIS component of this service. Regrettably, Amanda's not able to join us, so I'm gonna wing it at bylaw compliance. As I mentioned, this service 500 includes electoral area planning, our geographic informations group, bylaw compliance, and policy planning. Also, you'll hear us refer to it as our long-range planning group. The service establishment and the participants in the service, as you know, are electoral area A, island portion, electoral area B, and electoral area C. So the budget details are shown in this very small unreadable slide. We will refer to the details throughout the presentation, but at high level, please note that the overall service is primarily funded by tax requisition, so amounting to 82% in 2022 in our proposal. This year, we are proposing an increase in our operating budget, an increase of $22,960. And this is due in part to an estimated reduction in prior year surplus. So this amounts overall to a proposed increase in requisition amounting to $150,000. And that brings this services budget to $2 million versus $1.85 million last year. This amount, I would just note, is a little bit closer to the requisition that we proposed in 2020 prior to Rethink Comox Valley. So although the number seems very stark, it is on par with where things were, the trajectory that we were on prior to the pandemic. Based on the estimated tax rate for 2022, this means that for a dwelling assessed at $600,000, the overall cost of the service is $124.38. There are 3 reserve funds in the service. And in order to temper future year increases to the tax requisition, annual transfers from the future expenditures reserve are scheduled from 2023 through to 26. Would you take a question now, Director Arber?
Yeah, just to avoid going back on the slide, just because we're looking at numbers. Are these numbers reversed? Because the requisition will be higher in 2022 at 2 million, and 2021 was 1.8, but here it says the tax impact is 124 in 2022 and 130 in 2021.
Yes, very keen eyes. We do flag this in the report. The reason for that, it's not intended as a sleight of hand, but in 2021, we were using an assessed value of $500,000. And this $600,000 adjustment, you've been seeing that in the electoral area budgets that have come forward thus far. And so it does appear on paper, just as written, that we've decreased, but in fact, this is a proposed increase. Kevin, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, if I could, please, through the chair to the directors. Just in response to Director Arber's question, that is also kind of an impact of the significant change in assessments year over year. So, of course, as the assessments change, those cost per thousand can change. And actually, in most cases this year, our cost per thousands have actually decreased as a result of that significant increase in assessment. So it's a combination of what we're using as kind of the new baseline along with those changes in assessment.
Great, thank you. Director Grieve?
Yeah, thanks. Try again. Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, my question is much the same. Far be it for a local elected official to advocate increasing taxes in an election year. But, I read in here somehow we're trying to mitigate the costs of planning by raising or allocating the more tax dollars to it. And I'm just wondering, much the same as, some of the utilities in the Rec Commission, if we aren't trying to shield people from what's going on in the real world. I mean, we see increases in our staffing costs. We see increases for builders in building materials. And of course, raw land costs have gone through the roof. I'm just wondering, I mean, at the very least that our charges for the planning service should be keeping pace with the cost of living rises. We shouldn't be subsidizing that. I mean, in some regard, it's less of an overall cost for building now than it would have been 5 years ago, because other factors have taken off. So I'm just wondering, when was the last time we actually reviewed our charges for our services?
Through Madam Chair to Director Grieve, the last time we had a look at the planning application fees was in 2014, and for building, I believe it was 2015. I would say that generally the application fees amount to about between 2 and 4% of the overall revenue within the service.
Director Reeve, I'll allow a follow-up, but we're kind of going off topic, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, we're talking budget,
Sure.
and it's how you view the budget as a whole. I mean, it's all great to, I don't think that we need to act as the parents of our constituents and shield them from the costs of the real world. We're talking 2014, 2015, the world has changed. So I'm just wondering if maybe not this budget cycle, but we should look to keeping it comparative to the other overall costs, rather than always going to the unlimited money that the taxpayer seems to have. We are a regional district. We pride ourselves in the fact that our services are specific to deliver services to the people that receive the services. So the costs are allocated to the people that use those services, whereas in planning, a huge number of people pay into planning, but they don't do anything that would merit staff time in planning. So I'm just wondering if our focus shouldn't be service delivery. If you pay, you play. You play, you pay. And I think we're getting off that. I think we're going into general taxation for things that maybe should be more specifically targeted at the people that use the services.
Director Grieve, if you would like to make a motion under new business around review of our application fees, I'd entertain that. And I don't know if staff have any other comments apart from, yeah, okay, thank you.
Get me drift though.
Yes, we get the drift, so I'll hand it back to staff.
Great, thank you, Chair Hamir. So just switching gears from the overall service now, I'll speak briefly to the financial plan highlights specifically for 500 and 503, and these are our two planning functions. So between these two planning functions, just kind of speaking to how we do try to spread our resources across, it's interesting, I think, to note that 17 positions within the organization, so certainly outside of the service, are partially funded using dollars from this service. So in 2022, we are proposing an increase in personnel dollars amounting to $172,689. We're proposing the addition of a senior planner within function 500. We're proposing the reallocation of the community economic resilience coordinator from function 550 into 503. And we're proposing some reallocation of support service dollars. When I talk about Amanda's work in a moment, you'll also hear me say that we're proposing the creation of a new position called a Bylaw admin coordinator, and I'll speak to that in her section. Operating costs between these two functions are proposed to decrease by $23,000, and this is due primarily to a reduction in prior year surplus. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Tom True, Manager of Planning, to speak to some of our accomplishments in 2021 and outline our work plan items for 2022. And I will note that there are detailed project plans for a few of the projects we're proposing to undertake in 503 appended to the staff report. Thank you. Tom? Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Alana. Through the CEO to Madam Chair and the directors. As you can see on the graph on the right-hand side, 2021 was a busy year for planning services. The graph shows that types of applications received. There was an increase in applications in 2021 compared to the last 2 years. The increase in applications mostly came from our environmentally sensitive area development permits, our home occupation, and our commercial industrial development permits. The home occupation increases, I believe, is due to COVID-19. I think people are seeing the options of working at home, moving their business into the rural areas. And as you probably know, all of our residential zones permits a home occupation with certain restrictions within it. Applications that actually decrease or are development variance permits and are BOV variants. And these reductions in applications is due to the changes to our carriage house regulations and also our accessory building heights. So you have probably seen a lot less carriage house and height variances for accessory buildings. So moving forward, most of the applications usually takes between 1 to 3 months to complete, but there are some applications that are more complex and larger files. And these applications are rezoning applications, our Saratoga Speedway applications, and our Union Bay Estates applications. We're working through them and they do take some time. So on top of our day-to-day applications that we do receive, we do have to go through their regulatory process in regards to the larger projects. Planning staff continues to support other departments on their initiatives and projects, such as supporting their fire department with the 2 fire halls in Merville and Mount Washington. We also are supporting the Parks Department with their One Spot Trail, and also with the engineering department with their numerous projects that they're endeavoring. So on top of all of those, staff is working through helping out other departments, but also processing applications. As you may recall, last year we did amend the zone bylaw and we permit domestic chickens in smaller rural areas, but we also updated some of our definitions just to make it more clear, but also updated some of our zoning maps. So we are moving forward with that. I can see either this year or next year, we will be looking at seeing if we can amend the zone bylaw once again too. Planning staff continues to undertake the public outreach and public education. Last year, staff completed a farmland development permit tutorial video, and this is live on our website. We're hoping to create one more video tutorial, which will be our tiny homes and with assistance with the building department and bylaw compliance. The next 2 points, I will pass it back to Alana to talk about the Food Hub Feasibility Study and the Coastal Flooding Mapping Project.
Sorry. Thanks, Tom, through you, Madam Chair. As I noted, there's a little bit more detail included in the appendices to the report. So if you have specific questions, I'd be happy to respond to them. But generally, 2 of the key projects that we're undertaking within Function 503 this year relate to agriculture planning. And so there are 3 components to that work. One is exploring step 1 of the Food Hub feasibility results, so that you might remember step 1 implementation. The second part of that, towards the end of 2021, we brought on an agriculture coordinator. You'll recall that this is a new position for us. We're working with, and the successful applicant was Nikki Whitaker. Many of you will know Nikki from her extensive work with the Farmers Institute. So working with Nikki to do up her work plan, firm up, or I shouldn't say firm up, but maybe take advantage of some more of the opportunities through the Ministry of Agriculture to bring more of the programs to the Comox Valley. So that'll be a great resource for us. And then the third component of the agriculture planning work is the preparation of an agriculture plan. You might remember that we were successful in obtaining a grant for some funding towards this plan from the Investment Agriculture Foundation. And so we're just finalizing the RFP and we'll be posting that very soon. That's not a plan that will be completed this year, however, given the extensive consultation that we want to do on that plan. And so we'll be looking into 2023 for completion. And then the third project, I talk about this one all the time, you're getting sick of it. Coastal flood mapping was phase 1. The adaptation strategy is phase 2, and we're just wrapping that up with the consultants. I hope that we're bringing you something in March to talk about what adaptation could look like in the rural areas, in particular for some of our projects as the CVRD. You might remember we did really targeted consultation through phase 2. And in phase 3, the year ahead, we're proposing some grant application funding. We're just putting in for a grant to do something more at the neighborhood level with community members. So that's when you'll start to see that piece unfold. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Thanks, Elena. Director Arbor.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really, thank you for the detail around all this. And I guess generally speaking, I'm just trying to think, because we don't talk a lot about that, how, this is obviously operations, but I'm still curious about how we work in the planning. So I have felt like, we had the past general manager of planning leave and then didn't really get replaced. So I've been worried about staff kind of double loading for the last 10 months. At the same time that we're really growing, especially the RGS related work. I think that takes time for planning staff in terms of that broader regional collaborations and poverty reduction, all this other stuff that we see at the board. So I was wondering how it all worked. And I guess what I'm trying to read is you mentioned we are going to bring the position that was under a regional function, so with economic development, right? So that position is moving over under planning, which means we will pick up the entire wage rather than sharing it with the municipalities, so to speak. And then we're bringing a new senior planner. And then I guess your time or that senior planner time, some of it will go probably to the RGS and things like that, right? So I'm just trying to figure out how it's all going to work, because sometimes you do wonder when you're not in operation who's doing what and whether it's working well. I have felt that personally we needed more capacity in the planning department the last year, and it's good to see it come. So the hiring is actually happening right now. I think there's a process underway. Is there any insight as to when that position might start? And the second is coming out of 2021. How do you factor in the next term, like the potential RGS review and all those things? Do you feel that with the way you're setting up right now, you'll be able to absorb potentially more work into 2022 and past?
Thank you for the question, and I think both Alana and I can provide some information that help provide you with an answer, and I'll deal with the sort of higher level. And that is that I appreciate the acknowledgement that there are a lot of demands on the department, and we have been short-staffed. That isn't for lack of trying. It is a very competitive market to secure good, strong planners, and we did put it out to market to replace the manager, and unfortunately, in the end result, there was not a suitable candidate to fill that position. We are resilient, though. We do utilize the resources that we have, and one of those is the allocation of time and effort and resources of Lisa Kilpatrick that was first hired in the economic development function. But as we're making adjustments to that, she has come to the team and is aiding and assisting Alana with many of the initiatives from RGS and otherwise. And I can maybe get Alana to speak to her allocation of wages or what's proposed, because some of that will be presented in the RGS budget. We are in the midst of hiring the senior planner, and certainly any work that we do or have and can transfer to people in the planning department helps free up Alana and makes her available to manage the RGS file and those more complex projects that we're relying on her for. So I'll just pass it on to Alana to speak a little more specifically about the allocation of positions between RGS and planning.
Thanks very much, Russell. Through Chair Hamir, you're right. There is, sometimes it feels funny to us talking about who's doing what, because it is the same people. So as Russell has pointed out, that addition of a senior planner, we're really hoping that will have almost a trickle down effect. So, even though we have this division between long range and current, there are a couple of key people who have the ability to work back and forth as the work plan changes and as projects arise. So that's really our hope there, that filling that position, and then ultimately, that will leave us with that net increase of one. So we'll see a new body, at least one new body, which would be really great. That will help. As far as the RGS, I won't speak to that too much in detail, because to be honest with you, we're still working on it, and we'll be coming forward to you with that proposed budget. But you're right, it's a tight ship. This year, we're just going to try to be, really candid with you about what we can take on, where our limits lie, and then ultimately, you'll decide what the priorities are. And so respectfully, we're working within that framework.
I might add to Chair, in terms of the RGS, right now, the commitment that the board has directed to us is to do a scoping study. And a scoping study is Alana bringing forward the what the framework for an RGS review may or may not take. The board will have to put its mind to determining what that RGS review will be, but in consultation with its municipal partners, because the RGS service is something that is in partnership. It's not solely within the realm of decision making of this board. So when that is done and when that is taken, certainly we'll have to reflect on the resources, not only for the regional district to undertake that which the board and its municipal partners want to do, but ensuring that the municipal partners have the capacity also to undertake that form of review that's being contemplated. So lots of decisions to be made around the RGS coming forward, with Alana's information on the scoping study to help you to determine and decide with your municipal partners where you want to go.
Thanks for that, CEO. You have a further?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks for all that additional information. And I realize this year spills into next term as well. So, you know, the three of us may or may not be around this table, I think, but just my feedback too is anyways, if I come back, I will definitely keep pressing on other files, like for example, into next term, like OCP review will be at the 10 years mark. Maybe a local area plan for Union Bay. Now I see the eyes glazing over, but I'm just saying that I think there's pieces that are coming down the pipe too that will I think necessitate a really strong and well-resourced department. When I talk about Union Bay, for example, some of the questions I'll ask is that whole integration potentially with Comox First Nation, Union Bay Estates, the existing community. There's a huge piece of work that we haven't started there that I think next term I would advocate for. So that's just a signal. Again, it's a funny year because we're just, you know, we can't plan for what the next board will want to do, but I just thought I'd flag it today anyways.
Thank you. And Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, seeing as you brought up the RGS, I make no bones about the fact that the regional growth strategy, being that I was there, was based on a lot of erroneous information that was gathered even before the economic meltdown. So if we're going to be looking ahead for even a scoping exercise, my question through the staff is how much data are we getting now from the Canada Census? Is it just still trickling in? And we'll be able to have that wealth of information to work off of, because I think it's absolutely critical we deal with up-to-date information, not 2016. Thank you.
Through Madam Chair to the directors. You're right, the timing is almost serendipitous. So we expect the 2021 census to be released in at least 7 installments and then perhaps some interim installments. The first is coming this month, February. So we'll see that unfold over the course of the next probably 9 to 10 months. And we will have that data to draw from. Because I think you're right, it'll be a richer and more robust document if we're able to tap into the most current census. The other thing that's really important to remember is that you've been doing a lot of work, study work over the last couple of years, poverty reduction, housing needs assessment, and all of that data feeds into this review. And that's why we wanted to set it up in this way, suggesting that there was some good, foundational work that could and should be done prior to embarking on RGS review. Similarly, the municipalities have been undertaking much of their own work. Of course, Courtney, with their recently released for public consumption OCP, they've done some good data work that will help us have some insights into what's happening in Courtney as well. The other big feed into this work, of course, is servicing. And so incorporating a lot of the really good work that engineering services staff are doing right now to really help us understand, particularly in those settlement notes, the piece about the Union Bay local area plan, Saratoga local area plan. We really needed to understand what was happening from a water and potentially sewer perspective before we embark on those initiatives. So we're really hoping that all of the stars will align and this timing will actually be the best timing for the work.
Thank you. I have a few questions myself. Alana, are you going to be going into or delving into some of the more detailed projects in the appendix, or should we just ask questions?
I certainly could, but if you'd like to prompt with questions, that would be That'd be great.
Sure, okay. Well, I'll maybe first start off with a comment that Tom made about the development, like the videos that you've developed. And I'm curious actually about the tiny homes one. You know, you don't have to I don't need to know about how, you know, the whole video is coming, but just the basic messaging. I'm curious what the message is going to be on that video.
Thank you, Director Hamir. The purpose of this video tutorial is we will be working with bylaw compliance and the building department to create a tutorial that will capture enforcement, and will capture the building code regulations, but also planning. We have heard lots of news about the tiny homes the last couple of years, but to be honest with you, this year it has been pretty quiet. I think there are builders who are creating these tiny homes are getting their tiny homes certified, which is great, which is helpful, and I think that information is being relayed to the public too. That, you know, purchasing just tiny homes from anybody, they do require some type of approval from local governments. In regards to what type of information will be there, we will be reaching out to these contractors to see if we can help understand where they're coming at and create some tutorial that is simple and easy. But at the end of the day, we encourage the public to come into the office to speak with staff to get their information from us.
Super, thank you. And I'm glad to hear that. I didn't realize that there were now some certified builders, so great to get that message out, because I think there still is interest as we see housing prices, you know, going through the roof. So questions on some of the appendix projects. Obviously, I'm really pleased to hear that our agricultural research work is happening, and we've got Nikki hired. Just curious about the hire for the IEF grant. Will any of that work commence prior to the summer? Will we have some pre-work happening?
Through Madam Chair to the directors, that's our hope. So we're just working with procurement right now to get that RFP posted. And I believe the tentative start date that we've put in that contract is April the 1st.
Okay, great to hear. Awesome. And then I'm curious just about the coastal adaptation project. What will you be coming back with the project on the demonstration site on Dyke Road, or can you reveal a little bit about what staff are thinking might be happening?
Through Madam Chair, this is a really exciting one for us because I think it gives us an opportunity to put some of this work into motion in a really public way. So this is a project that we're undertaking with Parks Planning staff, and we've partnered with the BC Stewardship Centre and Comox First Nation, and Project Watershed is also going to be involved, being the lead biologist, or the on-site biologist for the project. So we're doing the Green Shores project through the BC Stewardship Centre grant, and then we've built the project out a little bit bigger, recognizing that we wanted to hit as many marks as we could with delivering the work. So we are, I think March 8th, we're gearing up for a site session, and that's with the coastal engineers, the biologists, and Comox First Nation. And then we'll start to roll out construction. We're hoping to be able to get going on in 2023, just sort of looking at the alignment with the conveyance project, making sure that we are, again, making the most of the two projects going ahead. But I think it'll be a really great opportunity to show the public what a naturalized shoreline can look like, how we can start to boost some of our own resilience, and hopefully use that as a bit of an indicator for folks who might be contemplating similar interventions in their rural waterfront properties.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And then last question, the ecosystem and habitat conservation project. Is that just primarily going to be mapping areas that have ecological sensitivity, or are we looking more at the whole, just wondering about the scope of what that project is going to look at?
Through Madam Chair, so we, in the province, as you know, we have the sensitive ecosystem inventory, which classifies a number of ecosystems. And so we last worked with Project Watershed on this project in 2014. And so really it's just time for an update. And that will give us a really good sense of what's happening to the mapped ecosystems. And hopefully we'll be able to identify new systems that maybe need to be protected. So as a body of work in the interim, that really is incumbent on a couple of things. It's a partnership with Project Watershed, likely some grant funding, and then working really closely with Brian Pearson and his team to update our own sensitive habitat atlas once that work is in place. Brian might speak to this a little bit when he comes on, but Brian and his group are also planning an update of our orthophoto. So that's a critical piece of work that feeds into that project as well. Ultimately, I think we'll be able to use the data, that raw data, to help set policy.
Great. Okay, thanks. And I've spurred a question on from Director Arbor.
Well, since we're in the appendix, might as well keep going. I just have one. And this one is just a minor thing, but I thought I'd bring it anyways, because with all these different documents, sometimes, like I'm looking at the community greenhouse gas emissions inventory, right? And for the electoral areas, and in the appendix here, it talks about the long-term goal to work towards implementing the goals and objectives of the regional growth strategy and reduce greenhouse gas emission by at least 50% by 2030, 60% by 2040. But here's because 2 weeks ago I read the OCP. Our OCP on page 18 and 19 actually references for the rural OCP, the Comox Valley Sustainability Strategy targets for climate change. So here it talks about RGS, but really I think it should talk about what's in the OCP. It's a small difference. In our OCP, it talks about 65% by 2040, and the RGS talks about 60%. But I just to have that consistency, and for me, I think we've barely mentioned our OCP. I think in our 3 years in the rural areas, I think we focused a lot on the regional growth strategy, the discussions, but that's kind of why I'm thinking, even if it's to do a review next term of the OCP, because I think it's not the only place where the rural area selected to kind of follow the sustainability strategy rather than the RGS. So it was a step up. It's probably this guy's fault across the table here, but you would have been there when the OCP was created. Anyways, just a couple notes, but overall, I have to say, all these projects I'm super excited about, and I'm so thrilled with how much there has been work happening in the last 3 years on all these things. It's really, really awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, and I'll add my 2 cents too, that I'm really happy that we are increasing some of the capacity in planning. I mean, it's something that I think we've been asking for a long time. Just, the worried, because we know this board has been putting a lot on our planning department. So very happy to support the budget for that. I don't see any other lights up. So, Director Grieve.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the board, and they're talking here about the update, protection of forest habitat and tree canopy. I'm just wondering if that is not going to turn out to be an expensive blind alley, because my understanding is that we just don't have the tools in our tool chest in electoral areas to have much impact on tree cutting. So I'm just wondering, I mean, it's all great, but I have seen this term a lot of really charges off on different ideological cants that end up in costing money, but you got a nice report. But I'm just wondering, I mean, is this futile? I mean, we're all experiencing it. I know that Arzina experienced it up at Uban Road, and we experienced it up at Rennie Road, where they just went in and took everything and had very little regard for the water courses. So I'm just wondering, I mean, are we just fooling ourselves? Are we just puffing ourselves up like we're a municipality, or do we really have any tools under our legislation to do anything?
Through Madam Chair to the directors, I have to believe that it's not futile. And in electoral areas, it is different from a municipality, but I wouldn't want to suggest that our municipal colleagues have a hammer either. So when we're talking about deforestation, like the situation up at Rennie Road, we really have to rely on a whole range of tools rather than one single tool. And so this work, updating the environmental and hazard development permit areas, this is our effort to add some more rigor. But the other thing, and Robin will be bringing this forward, maybe not next week anymore, but into early March. We're proposing to split the development permits up so that we can put some of the regulatory pieces into our zoning bylaw, which would give us, we're hoping, a bit of a regulatory stick, which we currently don't have with development permits. Development permits are really tough, I think, right across the province. There's a big expectation. It's really true. We get a lot of good study that goes with them, but the enforcement piece is really, really challenging, as you know, because it's through the courts. And so we're going to try this. We're going to suggest to you that we set ourselves up as a bit of a pilot in the province to put some of the regulatory pieces into our zoning and see if that helps. But you're right on some of the bigger issues around deforestation. We really could benefit as regional districts from advocacy work to the province to help us out on that enforcement side.
Thank you for that. And I take heart in some of the creative problem solving that the planning's coming up with. So look forward to seeing that from Robin. I don't see any other lights up. On receipt then, all in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. We have a recommendation. Oh, is there still, sorry,
Through
further?
Madam Chair, yeah, I would just hate to leave, Brian Pearson, he's on the line, I believe.
course.
But
Thank you.
he'd like to talk about some of the important work that
Oh,
GIS
yes,
is doing.
and
Thank
not
you.
to say that we know how important the GIS is too.
Yes.
So, over to
Thank you,
Brian.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through the CAO and through the chair, I just want to update a little bit on GIS. So it is part of the planning function. The GIS department's made up of 3 staff members and myself at 30%. And we look after all the mapping for the regional district all the way through to our public IMAP. And we also have an internal IMAP for staff to use and access property information, and actually most of the information that they develop in the planning permitting process and building permitting process as well as we do sell our service, our IMAP service, out to several regional districts and the municipality of Cumberland. Right now we're potentially, and you'll see in 2022, taking on Alberta Clayoquot as well. Just in the last year, just in terms of budget, our actual budget's gone down $209. It's a combination of our staffing going up just due to QP with the latest QP agreement. And then there's been a drop of operational costs this year. Obviously, staff aren't able to travel to some of the conferences that they go to keep up their GIS skills. We're doing a lot of that online. So that has reduced our travel costs this year as well as last year substantially. In terms of 2021, if you've used our public IMAP, you'll see we've incorporated the 2020 air photos. The process of, and we've been adding air photos to IMAP since 2012 every 2 years. I mean, it is an extensive process of working with other regional districts to capture those air photos. And then once they're done, that's about a 6-month process. And finally, when we get the data, it's usually into the next year. So it takes us about 1 or 2 months to actually build all the connections and put that data onto our servers and add it to all our sites. So that's been completed in 2021 for the 2020 air photos. We've built new workflow applications for our internal IMAP, not our infernal IMAP, as the line says there. I know some people sometimes complain about it, but it's definitely our internal IMAP that we've added the new functionality. 2 of my staff members and myself have been working with our water department on integrating the new asset management system and computer maintenance management system into the water department, which will become an asset management system across our all of our departments, but water stepped up to jump into it. So they are actually assisting financially some of the wages of the GIS department, 5% for each of 2 employees, just to be a part of that process. And then we are actually launching for water, actually literally this week and this month, the new CityWorks maintenance management and asset management system for them. And then that will unlike COVID, or like COVID, we will spread very quickly to our other departments over the next couple of years. And then also just supporting our the Village of Cumberland, the other regional district contracts that we have in terms of our IMAP. Next slide, please. 2022, we're looking at collecting new digital air photos starting in May. We're just in the midst of talking with our contractors and the other regional districts to capture that. That gives us a huge cost savings when we do it as a common group across the North Island. Once we have that in place, they'll begin in May and June capturing those new 2022 air photos, which, like Alana said, will definitely form the basis of some of the work that we're going forward ahead with. We're also developing and launching a new internal version of IMAP that will essentially having to go with the changes in software that we use internally. We're building a whole brand new IMAP. So Tanya and our departments have been working on that, and we'll be launching that probably June or July. Integration of the asset management to other services. So hopefully we'll be working with parks. They've been collecting their asset data with one application. We set them up with a number of years ago, and we'll be integrating that as well as our fleet management into our CityWorks application across the year. And then we just added the initial phone calls last week, but in meetings that we'll be working with Alberni Clayquat and building a public IMAP site similar to Clayquat and Mount Waddington and Cumberland to provide them an IMAP service. And that brings revenue into the regional district, into the GIS function to cover the cost of software and some of the work we do for them. And then again, supporting our contracts becomes sort of another piece that we do on the side of our desk with our member municipalities and regional districts. And the last slide. And this is just unfortunately, I got the pictures of you all down one side here, but this is just showing the revenue we do bring into cost. Essentially, it does cover some of our GIS function costs in terms of software and supporting our IMAP sites. We do bring in about $6,000 per regional district per IMAP site per year, and that just covers the cost. We don't have to do much for that other than updating their information and then making sure that it's up and running, providing that service out to them, as well as we do capture our sales of services to other CVRD functions. Since it is an electoral function, we do have to bill our other functions that don't pay into the electoral function for the use of our services in terms of the internal the work we do for the other departments. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Before I turn it over to Director Arbor, I have yet to hear a positive reference to COVID spread, so you get the gold star for that. Director Arbor.
Thanks. Yeah, really, really awesome. I think those are the kind of stories I like to tell people because I think there's always a perception that all levels, orders of government are fairly static and you know, happy to do their own little thing and that's it. But I like to tell people that the regional district is actually entrepreneurial. You know, if you look at our 911 service that we contract out to others, and that helps reduce cost. This one, I'm not seeing a lot of margin. I'm sure that you're putting some time, staff time in probably helping out. I've worked with GIS in the past, and I know it's not probably not a turnkey operation for the other regional districts. There's probably always little things that come up. So I imagine it's more cost recovery than us making any kind of profit. But just the fact that the quality of the product that we put out there is appealing to others is just wonderful, and that's a testament to the quality of the work. So kudos on that. And yeah, that'd be great if Alberni Clayquat come on board one more, so that would be 3 regional districts in Cumberland that participate into the IMAP tool. And it's a great tool. My only question is, you got me really curious with the internal IMAP, which I guess elected officials don't have access to. That's okay. But I'm wondering, as you talked about the CityWorks, you had me confused for a while because I got this other project with City West, but CityWorks is the water. So is it a case where, say, you know, in Union Bay, we have a lot of questions around the water system and where the pipes are. And, you know, we had a differential of almost 20%, not knowing how many kilometers of pipes there was in the system. So is this a case where we're actually putting where the infrastructure is on the ground into the GIS, you know, the IMAP system? And then we tack on asset management and the age of those pipes. Is it like a visual representation that goes on the map of the various systems we have across the regional district, or I didn't quite understand otherwise?
Yes, through the CAO, through the chair to Director Albert. CityWorks is a software application that initially Water Department have purchased, and it sits over top of GIS and works with the GIS data that we have. But yes, you are correct. It allows for us to put in the GIS information of those pipes. So we do have a spatial representation of all our water pipes, and including now Union Bay, Royston area, and then also the regional water system, as well as the electoral areas we service from that. So those are all in literally segment by segment and valve by valve, hydrant by hydrant. So every single piece of those, every single piece of asset for those systems is essentially a unique piece of information that then gets coded to that when they're out in the field doing a hydrant repair or a hydrant check or a hydrant inspection, that they can take photos, it gets attached to that specific hydrant, or if they're in a valve chamber, it gets attached to that specific valve changer. So they build up this inventory of information of that asset that will be available in perpetuity to look at, analyze in the future, look at the cost monthly, weekly, or yearly to maintain those assets or parts of those assets. And then again, the system will metamorph or grow out and be able to bring and look after our fleet management, our sewer pipes, our parks, everything right down to park benches, park signage, all sort of individual geographical assets out there will be able to be brought into the system because we have that GIS information, and then we start maintaining all the information about the care and maintenance of that specific asset.
Did you?
Yeah, thank you. That's super exciting, and I don't think we'll have it in time for the Union Bay Water Master Plan, but I could envision a day where a document like that could have a very visual representation, almost color coded, for residents to see, you know, what is the status of the Royston system. So you got your green pipes that were installed in the last 20 years, and your orange pipe in 2040, and your red pipes that are, you know, probably failing. So that's a really strong foundation for the future, not just for internal departments, but I think even potentially for the public to understand where they're at in regards to their different systems. Thank you.
Okay, and just to add after, the system allows the staff members to go out with iPads that are actually securely on our network, and they're out there entering that information, collecting that information, and then they can also see the information they need in the field without having to, you know, contact anybody. Everything's available to them on that iPad when they're working on those assets, whether it's a park asset or a water asset or a sewer asset. So yeah, it's quite an integrated system. We're essentially launching this month, and it's already, I think we did our first inspection last week with it.
That's great. Thank you. Director Grieve.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick story. We all know that quite often even official records can be wrong. When I was living in Courtenay, I was supposed to be hooked up to the storm sewer, and I wasn't, and I was flooding out. So finally they came and dug it up and realized, no, I never was connected. But it reminds me of the story of the city in Nanaimo, where they had Big Jim, who used to do all the public works stuff for years and years. And Big Jim retired and ended up in a senior's home. And occasionally the public works would go and pick Big Jim up and take him out and say, Jim, where was oh, it's over there, you know. So obviously this is a far cry from those days of, you know, build it, bury it, and forget it. So just a story, but it's a true story.
Thanks for that. And yes, GIS, the whole system looks, it sounds really impressive, and happy to see that we're moving in this direction of having much more of the assets coded and sort of maintained digitally as well. I don't see any other questions from the directors. Any further reports?
Madam Chair, Kevin might have a few more details just to share with the directors around the tax implications of the planning service to help qualify things. I don't know whether you were satisfied with the original questions around that, but I'll just refer to Kevin to share that before you receive this. And while we're waiting for Kevin, perhaps we'll refer to CityWorks as Big Jim from now on.
Thank you very much, Russell, through the chair to the director. So yes, I mean, I'll do my best to try to, shed some additional light on the whole issue with respect to tax impact, because I know it can often be a bit of a difficult beast to try to get one's head around. So bear with me one sec. I'll just put one piece of info up here. So what you should be seeing in front of you is what both the directors and the general public will see if they were to go to visit our website and look at the 22-26 proposed financial plan. This lead sheet, as we call it, specifically for the planning service. And as you can see in the 2021 actual line here, based on the 2021 revised assessment roll, the estimated residential tax rate was 0.26 per thousand. Of course, when we go to calculate, the rates for the coming 5 years, we're basing that right now based on the 2022 completed roll. And given we did see, particularly for the areas that pay into this particular service, a roughly 40% increase in those assessments, it has resulted in the rate per thousand actually going down to just under 21 cents per thousand. So that's where we have to really watch what that overall change year over year in assessments is. So to bring that down to dollars and cents, if a home in 2021 was assessed at 500,000, that home today would be assessed somewhere in the ballpark of about 700,000. So as Alana noted earlier in their presentation, for a $500,000 home last year, that tax impact would be about $130. For that exact same house, assuming an average assessment increase, that same house would be paying about $145 this year. So that's about a $15 increase. What we often try to do when we put out these reports is we try to come up with a number that is fairly representative of what's going on in the marketplace. It's not meant to be exactly what may be going on in one specific service area or another, because as we've talked about many times, unlike municipalities that have a single tax base, we have upwards of 100 tax bases. And so rather than trying to land on a definitive average across the valley, because of course that may not be representative of what's happening in Comox versus what may be happening in Area C and so on and so forth, we try to land on a number that we feel is easily divisible so that the public can kind of take a look at that rate and say, okay, so what does that mean to us? So it's always a good idea to kind of focus on what that rate is, and then individuals can say, okay, well, last year my house was this, therefore this is what this would have equated to versus what is kind of occurring now. And it's partly why we, in the presentation we provided to the board with respect to a service where there was zero tax impact, showing that implications of how what is being paid or levied to a jurisdiction can change pretty significantly, even in a service where there is no requisition change, just because of that change in assessment. And as I said, in this case, we went from a tax base for the planning service of about 6.4 billion to a tax base now of about 8.9 billion. So that's a pretty significant single year increase. So not sure if that really helps at all, but certainly would be more than happy to answer any further questions.
Thanks for that, Kevin. It looks like we've got some questions.
Maybe not just
Director Arbor.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That does clarify, because I was still confused after the explanation, because we've seen such a large jump. What you're saying is that same house at 500, which would have been at 130, that house is now worth 720. They will pay 145. But the report was showing a decrease, which is what kind of ticked me, because I was thinking about the same house for the same house, not necessarily that averaging out. And I think that's how I think a lot of people would read it. So, and it probably shows, especially because there's been such a huge jump in assessments this year. So thank you for taking the time to explain that. It clarifies it for me. Thanks.
Director Grieve?
Thank you very much. Kevin, I'm just wondering, do you have a comparable graph to show what the fees and charges are that we actually charge the developer, the homeowner, the builder? Because my point is basically that it's been static for many years when everything else is going up. And I don't think that, at the very least, I think we should be keeping pace with at least the cost of living.
Through the chair to the director, specifically to Director Grieve. No, unfortunately, I don't have those stats readily in front of me. Something we could certainly pull together if the directors wish, and kind of bring that back subsequent. And I can certainly work with Alana and her team to look at what we can pull together in that regard.
Okay, I promise I won't harp on about it, but I do think that, you know, you should be paying your fair share if you're the one actually getting the services, rather than just dipping into general revenue. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. I think we'll call the question on receipt again, or unless there's.
Sorry, and we have bylaw enforcement as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
yay, thank
Which is
you.
Alana to
Yes,
do that,
Alana,
yeah.
back to you then. Yes. Sorry, Alana, go ahead. Great, great. Thanks very much, Chair Hamir. So as I said, regrettably, Amanda's not able to be here with us today, so I'll take a crack at her team's work. Next slide, please. So this group, as you know, I think, yeah, there we go. This group, as you know, is supported by 3 individuals. We've got Amanda, Fred, and Michael. And Michael is also providing support through the CSWM on the illegal dumping program. So that's where his time is allocated. You might recall Amanda mentioning in her last presentation around our consolidation of services. So this function 502 is responsible for land use and zoning violations. Also within land use, that also includes any building permit or non-building permit usually is the case. The other big piece of the work, and I think you've seen this come forward in a number of the other services, is that this group supports a whole range of functions and services across the organization, including within the engineering department and parks and solid waste, providing some certainly advice, but also some on the ground support as well. We work very closely with a number of community partners and with our municipal colleagues, trying to take a similar approach on some of our really key issues, and those have really reared their head over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. This is something that we were really excited about. This is our new dispute adjudication system. We are almost up and running. As you might remember, you approved a series of bylaw amendments that enabled us to do this. And I think this will prove to be a really efficient way to do business, and hopefully will also result in some cost savings for us. As you might know, Amanda and her team have really great working relationships with our local RCMP detachment, regularly going back and forth and being very judicious about that relationship and making sure that we use the RCMP resource very conscientiously. Similarly, we find that RCMP staff will reach out to Amanda and her team when there is opportunity for some sharing, information sharing or partnering as appropriate. Amanda flags here that we are still doing the water enforcement, and this is a part of the water conservation efforts within our engineering services branch. And so that means that our team is on the ground looking through primarily the warm weather months for those who are not abiding any water restrictions that are put into place across the region. In 2021, as you know, we had some success on some of our more significant bylaw compliance, those files that generated legal action. Some are still percolating under the surface, but certainly we did take some success. And then Amanda's last point here is that through the response and renewal report, the Rethink Comox Valley, that was really the impetus or the driver between consolidating the other services that she reported on a couple of weeks ago. Next slide, please. So here's a breakdown that Amanda's provided, really just to give you a bit of a sense of where bylaw compliance is spending our time. And as you know, really land use is the big piece of the pie here. Next slide, please. So in 2022,
Ton indicated some work that's going to be happening with bylaw compliance, both on the outreach and education side. And then also looking at how the some of our processes internally, we can align a little bit more to hopefully make things a little bit more streamlined for both folks who are in the compliance process, but as well as staff. The new adjudication system does trigger some training requirements, and so that is underway with building inspectors, for example. And then we'll be continuing to provide support to engineering and parks and solid waste. I would say that you might recall last year in 2021, we had a very successful contract with a part-time employee providing some foot patrol in our parks, and that was very successful. Just in the interest of thinking about our overall needs within the function and across the organization, you don't see that role proposed in the budget this year, but what you do see is a new position called the Bylaw Admin Coordinator. And the idea here is that this person is going to be in the office and they will be doing a lot of the behind the scenes work, preparing for some of our legal action work. So sort of keeping track of all of that evidence, for example, putting together all of our material for court. As you might imagine, this takes quite a bit of time. We're also hoping that this person will be our first point of entry for our public, our complainants, our municipalities, etc. And also this person will do some of the counter work, dog license sales, fireworks permits, etc. So the hope is that in addition to all of those things, as well as providing support to our new adjudication system, that will free up some of the time of our compliance officers who are out in the field to hopefully be able to still provide some of that service to the other departments. And we'll report back. Like this is an effort to see. We'll report back next year and let you know how that went. Next slide. I'm not sure if okay. So operating costs are relatively the same as 2021, just a very, very, very minor decrease. And as I've noted, particularly in respect to that bylaw admin coordinator, that's the personnel increase that you see, as well as the regular adjustments through the QP agreement. So ultimately, we end up with an overall increase within this portion of the function of just over $60,000. Great. Thank you very much.
Do directors have any questions on bylaw? Director Arbor.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's smart too. I mean, again, I'm not in operations, but just the way you described the new position, it seems like that would be a useful role to have somebody grounded rather than trying to do both the field and running around and coming back and, and then, as you say, somebody walks in the office with a random complaint. So I think that'll help the department, I'm sure. So I'm just thinking about something, what I've realized, especially of late, is how much, and you made a mention in the other presentation, how much we end up relying on our zoning bylaws to be the backstop line for a lot of the things in rural areas. On the commercial side, we're seeing an increase in home occupations, as reported by Ton earlier. So at what point do we join the conversation about having another backstop in our toolbox, which is business licenses?
Through Madam Chair to the directors. So as you might know, regional districts are not, we don't have the statutory authority to create business licenses or issue business licenses. I believe that that's something that would require some intervention by the province to give us that authority.
In the opinion of staff and the planning staff of other regional districts, is that something that would really help us on the bylaw enforcement side? Because we have a case that's live right now in a way, right? And there was really just a zoning bylaw to fall back on, right? There was no, I know municipalities, that tool is actually quite useful when you have problems. Whereas for us, we have a fairly deeply ingrained kind of fundamental piece of work, and you pretty much have to go to the court. There's no in between, right? So, well, I mean, there are in betweens, there's rezoning processes, but in the opinion of the professional planners of British Columbia, has the Association of Professional Planners of British Columbia said, this is a problem that municipalities have a tool that the rural areas don't have?
Through Madam Chair to the directors, I think there's sort of like, when I think about the issue of business licensing in the rural areas, I kind of think of two things. One, you might be motivated to think that this is a good tool because you're concerned about a depletion on your commercial tax base. So if you were seeing that migration out of, formal leases and you were seeing those businesses being undertaken in the rural area, that might be something that strikes you as a lost opportunity or a missed opportunity for the RD. And I'm thinking in particular, the Kootenays. I know that with the legalization of cannabis, I think they had a lot of those hard conversations around their table, knowing what an important part of the economy that sector is, and what are the merits of having folks doing that on their residential properties versus paying commercial taxes. So I think that's one thing local government might think about. And then I guess the other thing I would think is that in order for a further regulation to be effective for us, we'd need to have some jurisdictional alignment. So one of the things that we find with home occupations, when we see bylaw complaints come forward, it's often in respect to nuisance. So it's because of the noise, the smell, glare, and that sort of thing. So I think that would only be a useful regulatory tool if we had the other tools that we would need to regulate those nuisance pieces. And if we don't, then I think it might just feel to some rural residents that it's, one more layer, one more hurdle that they need to abide. So I'm not really sure, to be honest, if there'd be an overall benefit here. I'd have to give it much more thought and research. But we do know that a lot of our rural residents, they purchase their properties with the intention to work from their properties. And whether that's because they derive the income directly from the resources that the land generates, or because, a range of other reasons. And I think with the pandemic, we'll certainly see, as Tom mentioned, that shift, people using their property in different ways.
Thank you. No, I don't see any other questions from the directors. And anything left for staff to add on planning functions?
Through Madam Chair, no, thank you very much. This is our proposal to you for the planning service.
Thank you. Then I think we can now vote on receipt. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? And that is carried. All right, we do have that. We have a recommendation. Moved and seconded that the 2022-2026 financial plan for planning service functions 500, 501, 502, and 503 be approved. Any comments? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Great. Moving on, the 2022-2026 financial plan for Denman Island Recreation, Hornby Island Recreation, Part A, Hornby, Denman complexes, contribution services function 605, 606, and 607 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and Mark Harrison is here to present these budgets for you.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Mark.
Madam Chair, Russell, I believe that Kevin was going to speak to these services.
Okay, my apologies, Mark. Thank you, Kevin, for taking this on.
Thank you, Russell, through the chair to the directors. Good morning once again. So yes, I will be providing you just a short summary of the financial plans for these three little recreation services that support both Denman and Hornby Islands. So the overall purposes of these services are to provide some financial support so that two of our support agencies on both Denman and Hornby Island can provide year-round on-island athletic fitness and sports opportunities of various means and sizes over the course of the year. With respect to the Part A Hornby Denman Recreation Complex's contribution, this provides a direct contribution to the cost of the Comox Valley Recreation Complexes service, which falls under the purview of the Recreation Commission. And this is in lieu of them being actually a formal participant in that service due to a service withdrawal back in, I believe, about 2003. So just a quick overview of each of these services. As I said, for the Denman and Hornby Island recreation services, the services provided are done through nonprofit organizations on both islands. So that would be the Denman Island Residents Association, or DIRA, and the Hornby Island Residents and Ratepayers Association, being HIRA. And each of those organizations submit to the CBRD 5-year financial plans annually. And those 5-year financial plans outline their respective operational grant requests that they feel they require in order to support the various recreational activities and programs that they either directly deliver themselves or that they do provide some support by way of funding to other organizations across the islands. And in addition to the funding that these two organizations receive through this particular service, there is also an enhanced contribution provided to them through our recreation grant service, which is our function 600. And each group receives an additional $4,000 by way of an operational grant through that service. And then with respect to 607, Recreation Complexes Contribution Service, as I said, this is being done in lieu of them being formal participants in our 645-649 service. And that is based on, or determined based on a formula that was set in a service establishment going back to 2004. And that formula is the greater of $25,000 or population times $12.62. Now for 2022, for this particular version of the budget at the proposed stage, this continues to be based on the 2016 federal census figures, because currently those are the only figures we have available. And at that time, the population figures for the islands was 2,181. As Alana did mention in her previous presentation, we are anticipating some release of the 2020 federal census figures this month, and we're hopeful that the population figures are going to be part of that release. And so if we do receive those in time to kind of adjust those to reflect into our recommended budget, staff will certainly be doing that. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the tax requisition and impacts for each of these three services, as it states there, all three of these services are funded predominantly by tax requisition. And below in the table is the estimated 2022 residential tax rates, of course, per thousand of taxable assessed value and the resulting tax impact. So I've provided the rates for 2021 just as a comparison. And as we spoke to in the previous presentation, you can definitely see that as a result of that significant change in assessments year over year, the rate per thousand for each of these has gone down. And so what that means for a home assessed at $600,000 in 2022 will mean for them in Island Rec about $1,266, for Hornby about $1,926, and then for the Rec Complexes Contribution Service $9.90. And then lastly, just a quick overview of the three proposed budgets, that form part of this report. As you can see, relatively small requisitions overall. And really, pretty well a lot of status quo with the exception of the Hornby Island Rec Service, and that's driven by an increased request from the higher organization, but only really to the tune of about we're seeing an $11,000 increase overall in operating, of which the lion's share of that represents the operational grant provided to IRA. The other two services are pretty static in both the requisition levels and what we're anticipating to see by way of overall expenditures. And that's all I have for this one, and more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Director Arbor?
Thank you. This is year 3 or 4 of budget. I guess it's year 4. Our 4th year, but it's the first time that I actually see the formula of, from back in 2003 when we established the formula for the rec complex contribution for the island. No, I brought it up with our CEO in year 1 and 2, and then I took a pass in year 3 because we had COVID, but I sure wish that the exhibition grounds function was under the same formula. I think it recognizes a contribution from the islands, but also recognizing that very few people the access to those services is very difficult. I'll probably let it rest. I won't action it because we still have a lot on our plate, but just a mental note. And Kevin, one thing you didn't mention is, and I guess this one I will let rest as well, but I think both the Denman and Hornby rec functions are near their cap. in terms of their max requisition. So has staff given any consideration? Because I've talked to the Denman folks and it was almost like, okay, well, or was it the Hornby folks? One of the two, but they were like, okay, well, you know, we can't grow. But you can't grow without going back to the ratepayers, or in terms of some kind of assent process, right? So I'm just wondering if you've heard that at all in your conversation with either organizations, or if staff has put their minds to it as we approach those max requisitions.
Through the chair to Director Arbor, thank you. No, I haven't heard anything directly from the organizations. I mean, again, as I noted with respect to Hornby specifically, we have certainly seen an increase in the ask that they've requested, but certainly not heard any concerns with respect to kind of approaching the maximum requisition for each of those services. We do definitely have some further room within the 607 service. And yet we do have definitely some wiggle room left. I mean, it's not substantive. It should get us through certainly the next few years based on kind of what we're anticipating. But as part of our annual financial planning process, we do, really kind of look at our maximum requisitions and look at our current year requisition levels and flag any of those services where we're either approaching or literally kind of right on top of our maximum requisitions, and then we would be bringing back recommendations accordingly to the directors for your consideration if we felt a max requisition increase was warranted.
Dr. Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, through to Kevin, being that those services haven't received an increase in 5 years, they are not eligible for the 25% bump at the discretion of the director.
Through the chair to Director Grieve. So with respect to the maximum requisition, yes, I mean, that certainly is an option. As I said, right now, based on the requests we've received, those still fall within and under the maximum requisitions that we currently have. So we're not anticipating, over certainly this 5-year plan anyway, any issues with respect to kind of exceeding that maximum levies.
Okay, there's a follow-up from Director Arbor.
Yeah, just in closing, for the other directors, both of these functions, unlike, it's almost the reverse of our regional rec functions. Well, not the reverse, but the capital intensiveness of our rec function, it doesn't exist at all in Hornby and Denman. So none of the money goes to capital. It's all programs and operation. And definitely in the long term, I'm not sure if that's going to be tenable, because I think people, the expectations around facilities grow. I don't know how we'll answer that one. That's for the next 5 years. But there's almost $0 going to any kind of facility or capital improvements for the island. So it's all programs that are run usually in the summer and a little bit in the winter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the presentation? Hearing and seeing none, on receipt then. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And we've got a few recommendations. Move one, that the proposed 2022-2026 financial plan for the Denman Island Rec Service Function CO 605 be approved. Seconded. And comments? Director Grieve.
I mean, I'm just wondering if my colleague across the table here would be interested in doing a slight bump in anticipation, because you don't have to go to the maximum requisition. You can just have the headroom there should some unforeseen consequences or unforeseen circumstances appear, which looks like they may be. So just a thought that perhaps having that in your back pocket may not be a bad idea.
Director Arbor.
Really good suggestion, Director Grieve. It crossed my mind briefly, but I think why I'll let it rest, or we can let it rest collectively, is well, we do have a few uncertainties in the near term. And second, it looks like Kevin confirmed that the committees on both islands were satisfied with the level of budget for the coming year. And it might be the kind of decision that's good to know to do with a fresh term after next election.
Right. And I see Kevin's hand up. Did you want to add?
Yes, please, if I may, through the chair to the director. So just maybe to give you some hard data here. So for the Dem and Rec service, for example, we're requisitioning, just over $15,000 and anticipate that to carry through the 5-year financial plan. Currently, based on where assessments are at currently for 2022, our max requisition in that service is about 35.5. So we have considerable room there, given the size of this service. If you were to look at Hornby Island, so of course, right now we're anticipating requisitioning 31,000 this year, moving that up to about 35 over the 5-year plan. But we still have about almost $48,000 in max levy room there. And of course, as assessments continue to change and likely will continue to increase even modestly in future years, that overall maximum rec available will likely continue to go up slightly. So I feel we do have sufficient room there, at least for kind of the medium term. And then lastly, as I said, for the rec complex's contribution service, we're requisitioning a fairly nominal amount, about 27.8, and then really that's going to be unchanged over the 5-year financial plan. And we have about 166,000 in max requisition room available, so considerable room in that service.
Go ahead, Director Robert.
Sorry for making us waste a little bit of time. I'll just sneak, not snarkily. Anyways, I mean it with good humor. I'll just blame it on not having my house tables in front of me, which would have those max requisitions right there. Thanks, Kevin, for clarifying that, and apologies to the board. I thought we were much closer to those max.
Thank you for that, and thanks for clarification, Kevin. So we've got that motion on the table. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Would someone like to move number 2?
Move 606. Second.
Function 606 for the Hornby Island Rec Service has been moved. And comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And we have recommendation 3 for function 607. Seconded. Comments? Hearing seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Great. We'll move on. We'll do maybe one more. Or do you want to have a break now or before the greenways? Totally up to you. So, okay, we'll just break then. Why don't we get to 10 minutes? Is that okay? Stretch legs. So we'll be back at 10:40. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We have item number 4 up, I believe it is. Yes. So the 2022-2026 financial plan for Denman Island Community Parks and Greenways Function 619 and Hornby Island Community Parks and Greenways Function 620 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Mark Harrison is on the line to present this budget. For the next few budgets for parks. Thanks,
Welcome,
Mark.
Thank you, Russell. Madam Chair, I am here to present the proposed 2022-2026 financial plan for Function 619 and Function 620, so Denman Island Community Parks and Greenway Service, along with the Hornby Island Community Parks and Greenway Service. So I'll look at presenting a service overview, including work plan accomplishments from 2021 and our plans for 2022, and then look at our comparative budget summary from 2021 to 2022. So I'll do that for each of those services, and then we'll look at questions at the end. Next slide, please. So for Denman Island Parks and Greenways, in terms of service overview, our operational efficiency is really still driven by our strong community partnership that we have with the Denman Island Ratepayers Association through the DIRA Parks Committee, as well as through the DIRA Trails Committee, which is really largely made up of local volunteers. We do supplement that operational maintenance work with a private Denman contractor. We are proposing some increases to requisition kind of steadily over the 5-year plan, largely to help augment our reserves. And then in terms of work plan, we in 2021, we were basically working on completing design work for the Denman Cross Island Trail between Owl and Crescent and Gravelly Bay. So this design work is ongoing, and it's something that we're going to be kind of working towards in 2022 in preparation for a potential active transportation grant application. So with this, it is 3.5 kilometers of new trail that will connect again from our system from Owl Crescent all the way to the Denman Gravelly Bay ferry terminal. Next slide, please. In terms of comparative budget, just looking at kind of tax impacts first, we're looking at proposed increase to our requisition of $5,000 from 2021 up to $105,000. Our previous year's surplus is down quite a bit, so that should actually be a decrease on the one side, showing as an increase. And that's largely because in 2021, we put the brakes on a lot of projects. And so we ended up with a larger kind of surplus. Whereas in 2021, we kept trying to move our projects along. In terms of expenditures, personnel costs are projected to go up slightly, and that's largely due to a slight increase in staff allocations to try to make it more realistic in terms of staff time that's spent servicing this function. Operating is down slightly. And then our contributions to reserve are down quite a bit, and that's largely because we don't have that large surplus like we did in 2021. In terms of capital, we've got $180,000 that we're looking at in 2022, which would be there to support the Denman Cross Island Trail Owl to Gravelly Bay project. That would be approximately 30% of the cost of the project. We're thinking that it'll cost around $600,000, but those were based on numbers that we got from 2020. And once we get kind of more up-to-date design work, we'll have better costs, more realistic costs. Next slide, please. So in terms of Hornby, again, the operational efficiency is really largely driven through the community partnerships. These are very strong and important partnerships for us to have. Within Hornby, it is delivered through the HERA Parks Committee. It is a little bit different from the Denman service in that HERA actually manages the maintenance contractor and manages the day-to-day parks operations. Our agreement with HERA did expire in December on December 31st of 2021, and we are working with HERA currently to draft a new agreement. With this service, like Denman, we are looking at increases to the requisition steadily over the 5-year plan to, again, augment our reserves. In terms of work plan, in 2021, we completed the Gull Road Greenway, which is a really great addition to the Hornby roadside trail system. In 2022, we're planning some small trail upgrades in Mount Jeffrey Park, and are starting planning work towards sign and kiosk upgrades. One thing I should note within the work plan is last year we did do our second Canada Infrastructure Program grant for the shingle spit, and that was unsuccessful. So currently staff are in discussions with HERA and with the province on how we kind of best proceed with that. So once we kind of have something a little bit more concrete on plans and on ways that we can kind of move that forward, we'll bring that forward to the directors. Next slide, please. And if we can go back to the comparative budget. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we are looking at proposing increase to requisition of $10,000 over 2021, bringing in the requisition to $170,000. Again, like Denman, the previous year's surplus is quite a bit smaller. In terms of so that would actually for Hornby, that we've got an estimated residential tax rate of 0.1758. So for a home of 600,000, it would be $105.48. And I don't think I forgot to mention that for Denman. So for Denman, for 600,000, it would be $87.36. So back to Hornby, the operating costs are up. So HERA has asked for an increase of just over $8,200 for its operating budget. And like Denman, the personnel costs are slightly up to, again, reflect realities of staff time. And in terms of capital, we're looking at, quite a bit down from the previous year. That was largely because of single spit. So we're looking at just very modest capital for Hornby Island in 2022. And next slide. So that's it for my presentation. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Great, thanks. And Director Arbor-Scott, question?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now I'm hesitant. I've always relied on my memory so much, and I was wrong with the max requisition for recreation, so now I'm more hesitant. But I think it's the second year where we increased the staff time quite a bit for those functions. Could be wrong though, but I recall, as I recall, we did the same last year. So that's okay. I'm sure you're just looking at the time that's actually being spent, but that probably explains the small increase. More importantly, on the projects, so I'll start with the Hornby one. I made the comment last year, and I think I'll make it even more strongly this year. In terms of next step for shingle spit, the years are rolling by, and the terminal redevelopment plan for BC Ferries, I think was 2027, or it's coming up at some point where they're actually planning to do a whole lot of road work. You probably saw their plans, Mark, in terms of they've done all the pre-engineering and layout and design and all that. And I think our best chance with the province, and I'm happy to help advocate for that with RMLA and others, would be to work on a community partnership with BC Ferries to put our boat ramp in scope of their project, because they're literally going to do a bunch of work around that bay. They'll have all the equipment there. They're going to have barges moving in, all those things. So, and maybe if the province is interested, if we have 4 or 5 years to secure it, maybe BC Ferries, the province, would happily chip in to help contribute to the project. Because what I'm seeing is there's just limited programs we can apply to for this thing. ISIP, obviously we've got another project that's going in soon. And there may not be future grant applications. So I'm just looking at for the cost that we're now looking at with the boat ramp at 600 grand or whatever. That's a huge cost for local government. And if there's a way to partner with BC Ferries and the province even leaning on BC Ferries to say, let's make this happen, right? I think that would be, even if we have to wait a few years, that'd be my preferred approach. And Denman, the Cross Island Trail, El Crescent to Gravelly Bay. So you're not proposing, obviously, to do starting construction this year. So you're saying we can apply for an active transportation. What's the timing of that grant? Or has something been announced, or is it already in the works?
Yeah, Madam Chair, to Director Arbor. Thank you very much for your insight on the shingle spit. So that is definitely something, an avenue that staff will look into, and we will report back to you on options on how we can move that project forward. Completely agree that 600,000 for us to take on our own is a lot. So we do need to figure out a way that we can financially make that project happen, which is a project that is obviously very important to the residents of Hornby. In terms of the Denman Cross Island Trail, the active transportation grant just got opened up, and it closes at the end of March. So internally, we need to decide amongst departments on priorities for those applications, and so that's kind of still to be decided at this point. But once our designs are completed, we will be in a position where we could apply for those grants. And if we were to be successful on a grant, then technically we could potentially be starting construction this year.
Thank you, and I guess I'll ask an internal question, but because you referred to, oh, sorry, Madam Chair, is that okay?
That's right.
An internal question is, we just completed our active transportation plan for the valley with Hornby and Denman having, I'll call it having a toe in it. We didn't fully cover it, but we kind of included them. So when we go to apply to these grants, are you allowed to treat the Allen Strauss area as a different jurisdiction for which we're applying, or would this kind of compete with other areas of the regional district that we've prioritized in our active transportation plan?
Through Madam Chair to Director Arbor, I haven't actually looked at the application details this year, so I'm not sure if they've changed. But last year we were able to do applications separately for the islands from the mainland. They were considered a separate jurisdiction, but I'm not sure what, if anything, has changed for this year.
Yeah, I just want to say last words is just thank you for thinking about the islands, and I think people do notice on both islands that the CVRD is kind of investing time and resources in both maintaining the trails and also looking for additional amenities. Thank you so much, Mark.
Mark, one question that twigged in my mind when you were talking about signage. We just had a presentation from Tourism Vancouver Island, and one of their priorities for this upcoming year is wayfinding. And I'm just wondering if there might be any kind of synergies between the works that we are doing in parks around signage and wayfinding. Just looking at possibly cost sharing, or even just promoting the fact that, and folks have noted to me how much better signage is in Seal Bay Park and things like that. So I don't know if you've had a chance to speak to them at all at TVI, or if that's something that you're already working on.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for that. It's not something that I'm currently kind of working on. What we're actually trying to work on is just finalizing our parks signage guide, which was basically based on the work that we did at Seal Bay Park. So that's pretty much complete. So looking to change that, I don't think that that's a road that we really want to kind of go down. But whether we want to look at opportunities for partnership, that's something that we can definitely look into. I think with the with Mount Jeffrey, I think the big driver for the upgrading of those signs and kiosks will be to work in partnership with the Comox First Nation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sorry, I didn't mean to imply to change anything, more so to just see if they are thinking of a budget around signage that could help with some of our park signage that's already in the works. But if not, just maybe using that function like TVI and their platform to promote our signage and have an interesting write-up about it, because I don't know how many folks truly realize the consultation that went on to the naming and the use of local language as well. I think that they've all been really well done. So sorry to co-opt the conversation to a larger issue, but it just twigged. Yeah. I don't see any other questions for Mark. No. On receipt then, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. We have recommendation 1 that's been moved and seconded to approve the financial plan for function 619, the Denman Island Community Parks and Greenway Service. And comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. We have recommendation 2, moved and seconded to approve the financial plan for the Hornby Island Community Parks and Greenway Service function 620. No comments and all in favor. And that's approved unanimously. Great. Item number 5, the 2022-2026 financial plan for Bain Sound A, B, and C Parks and Greenway Service function 621 for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Mark Harrison will present this budget and answer any questions too.
Thank you, Russell. Madam Chair, I'm here to present the 2022 to 2026 financial plan for the Bain Sound Area ABC Parks and Greenway Service function 621. If we could bring up the PowerPoint.
Yeah, Lisa's just going to need a second to pull it up.
Thank you.
There's one that says 621 over there. Yeah. Okay, I think we've got it. I hope you can see it too, Mark.
I can't see it, but that's okay. So yeah, we're looking to present basically the presentation will include, there you go, I can see it now, thank you. We'll include a service overview. We'll look at the work plan for 2021 and what we're proposing for 2022. We'll look at the comparative budget summary, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of service overview, again, like Denman and Hornby Islands, the community part extremely important and continue to be very effective in delivering the operations for this service. The service is largely delivered through community health and not-for-profit organizations, which in terms of operations, we do continue to concentrate our operational spending on our flag to continue to have operational challenges. Sorry,
I think your feed was just coming in and out a bit. I wonder if you turn off your video, it might help with just the feed, because
sure.
Yeah. Thanks. Try again.
Yeah. Do you want me to start from the start then?
I think so. Just
okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry about that. I guess one of the downfalls of working from home. But again, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that operation, efficiency and delivery is largely done through community partnerships, which are, extremely important to the park service. Our operational side is largely delivered through our community health and our not-for-profit organizations, and it really continues to be effective. It does help with reducing our operational costs, but at the same time, it does help support our community. In terms of operations, we are continuing to kind of concentrate our operational spending on our flagship parks, those parks that are most kind of used by the public. But with COVID and with weather, we continue to have operational challenges. We've got pressures on our carrying capacity, and we're seeing that increased use in our park, which obviously translates on pressure to on our maintenance and our operational side. Just in terms of weather, could be climate related, and I would imagine, I foresee that these weather impacts are going to continue in the future. But the king tide events and the droughts and the high wind effects events are all having impacts on our operations and causing kind of increases to our operational needs. The other big piece I wanted to kind of chat about was the Regional Park Service. So we are continuing to work collaboratively with our municipal partners. We are hoping to finalize and have the background study to various service directors as well as to municipal councils here shortly. I think we are kind of planning for March. So that's going to be kind of wrapped up in terms of phase 1 of that project. So exciting to see that kind of moving forward, and exciting to see the collaboration that's really happening regionally on that piece. I wanted to briefly talk about the beach fire program. So as you know, for the last 2 years, the beach fire has been canceled because of COVID and restrictions around gathering. Within this operational budget, we are proposing to return the program in 2022, but at a slightly reduced service level to ensure that we've got some fiscal responsibility in there in relation to that program. Next slide, please. So in terms of work plan, briefly talking about what we were able to accomplish in 2021. In terms of capital kind of project that you see kind of on the ground and being completed, we completed the Union Bay Connector Trail, which really helps connect that Union Bay community and supports the residents of the Seaview Village Retirement Home. We had the Fannie Bay Playground was constructed, which was a really great partnership with the Fannie Bay Community Hall, and involved a lot of really great efforts and work together with residents of the Fannie Bay community. We were able to upgrade the Nob Hill stairs, so that was phase 1 of that project. And then obviously with the Quamut Park, we were able to construct a new bridge and put in new signage there in that park. In terms of 2022, the Seal Bay project is the Seal Bay Bates Road parking lot. That started in 2021. We're just still in the midst of finalizing it. It is open and functional, so it's very nice to have that parking lot open and creating a lot safer situation for residents and for park users. And from the feedback that I've heard, people are pretty happy with that parking lot. So we'll continue to finish that project. We've got some other Seal Bay projects that we want to continue. We want to work along the design of the Copen Loop Trail, working towards making that a fully accessible trail. We've got some bridge replacement. The bridge on the lower Don Apps needs to be replaced. And we would like to repair the viewing platform on Melda's Marsh. Other projects for 2022, through 2021, we were working on design in collaboration with Comox for the Lazo Greenway project, which would go across jurisdictions. So we're hoping to have that design finalized by the end of March so that it is ready for a potential active transportation grant. Other projects, I believe Alana had mentioned the Dyke Road projects. We're going to be supporting her on that in partnership with the Stewardship Center and with Comox First Nation. We've got some log wall repair work planned for Goose Spit. And with Nymph Falls, we want to start the management planning process. Next slide, please. In terms of budget, in terms of tax impacts, we, this service is largely delivered through tax requisition. We are proposing an increase of 100,000 from the 2021 budget to 1.6 million. That would be a tax rate of 0.1658 per thousand, and for a home assessed at 600,000, that would be $99.48, so just under $100. On top of that tax requisition, we do have a parcel tax, which is $19 per parcel, and that provides us with $193,458. Our other revenue is down slightly from 2021, and that's because in the 2021 we had some transfer from the comfort station service. So that comfort station service is now falling under the parks, which is going to again add some more operational costs to the function. This year's surplus is 300,000 is what's anticipated. It is a fairly large surplus, but it's largely because we didn't have a parks planner in place for most of 2021. So our personnel costs were quite down, and because we didn't have that resource, we weren't able to deliver some of our projects. And then we also, didn't have things like the beach fire program kind of running operationally. So in terms of expenditures, our personnel costs are slightly down, and that's due to a reallocation of staff wages between departments, and then also because of a small reallocation of staff to the islands. Operating costs, as we've discussed before, are up, and that's largely to be able to deal with the increases on use and carrying capacity that's happening within our parks, and just the increases to the costs of our contracts to maintain the service levels at where they're at. In terms of capital, we're at 530,000. There is a one there for 278, and I believe that we're looking at actually pushing that a little bit farther down the road. It's conversations I need to have with Kevin after. So we're looking at largely 150,000 for Seal Bay, 60,000 Goose Spit, 30,000 for Dyke Road, and then 250,000 in support of Lazo. So those are our large kind of projects for 2022. And next slide. I believe that's it. Happy to take any questions.
I'll let Director Green go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the CAO to Mark. Now, I think it goes without question that our park service is probably the most appreciated of most of our services. Realized early on in my political career, when I got elected in the late Bronze Age, that this is something that electoral areas could do and leave a lasting legacy. And that is why we went and brought in the $19 per parcel parcel tax for parks, basically with an eye on park acquisition. We know that the physical health, mental health, societal positive spin-offs from connecting with the natural order is very important. No more so to our municipal friends who use this service at least as much as the electoral areas, if not more. I think one of the surveys we did at the Goose Spit was mostly Comox residents, of course. Now, I see that we're we're living in an era, once again, I'm going to bring this up, that costs are going up exponentially. I know my assessment went up 51%, so land costs are definitely up. Construction costs, I think over the last 2 years are somewhere around 28, 29%. I recently bought a bundle of 1x2 and was astounded that it costs almost $50 for 1x2. So we're really not even treading water, even with a slight increase. And I'm glad you brought up the parcel tax, because it is a modified parcel tax. As you probably know, not everybody pays for every parcel. And that was in consideration of farmers, because a lot of farmers have multiple parcels on their farm. So we made it so that as long as it's contiguous to the other parcels, as long as it's owned by the same principal owners, that you pay $119. So once again, I think this is a time, and I know it may not be popular in an election year, to think about maybe doing a little bump on the $19 parcel tax. But for us to be effective, it's absolutely imperative that we look at everything through the lens of 2022 and what the Canadian dollar actually buys. So I'm just wondering, is this the time or place, or we wait till our parcel tax review at the end of the month to bring that up? Thank you.
Mark, I don't know if you want to answer that, or if Kevin would like to weigh in.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I believe that Kevin might be better suited to answer that question.
Through the chair to the directors, I'll certainly do my best. So yes, I mean, taking a look at all of our fees and charges and parcel taxes is certainly something staff, endeavor to undertake. And there are, certainly a number of such charges that we are starting to identify as likely in need in some kind of review. So, I mean, at this point, yes, I mean, the $19 per parcel has been in place for some time. And so it's been certainly something that Mark and I have had brief conversations on. But certainly if the directors would like us to revisit those, we can certainly do that. Whether that's kind of doable ahead of our parcel tax review panel, not sure that would be possible. But certainly going forward in anticipation of our, kind of next financial planning process ahead of 2023, certainly we could, look at the possibility of doing some kind of review and bringing something back to the directors for your consideration.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Director.
Subsequence, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess, for me, this is the time and place to have these discussions, just to say, well, let's just move it to the next year. Next year, who knows who's going to be here and how aware they're going to be of a lot of these issues. But I think it's absolutely imperative with parks that we keep ahead of the curve. As it is, we're losing ground. So I don't know how the other directors feel, but as I say, it's one of the few things that we can leave as a legacy for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, is parks. I heard a pushback when we brought in the parcel tax that we have enough parks already. Well, obviously we don't, and we don't have enough for future generations. So if we actually have to, we talk about first growth forests and stuff, if we actually have to buy the land underneath it, then that's pretty well what we're going to have to do. So I know we're moving ahead on a regional park discussion. That's very important. But in the interim, I see us rolling back the mill rate on this. Mind you, it's still an increase in real dollars. So I'm just throwing this out for discussion, because I do think that, one of the easy ways to do it would be to slightly increase that $19. I think it's been in place since 2012, my guess. So maybe it needs a review right now.
Madam Chair, if I could just ask Kevin the logistics, if the directors at this point resolve to increase that, say, from $19 to $25 or something to that effect, is that doable in terms of us responding and putting that in place for this year? And how does the parcel tax review panel relate to that conversation versus the ability for the board to set the tax rates for this budget.
Thank you, Russell, through the chair to the directors. So yeah, so it's important to note that with the parcel tax review panel, that is about setting or authenticating the role itself. So that would be, who are we actually charging, in this case, a $19 per parcel tax against? Now, once we kind of authenticate that role, then the next step is, literally by the end of this month, we then have to submit through e-tax to the province what our anticipated needs are for those parcel taxes. So we need to be able to set to them what is the total value we require based on the rates that we currently have approved and in place. So that's why I said it might be difficult to be able to quickly pivot and look at an increase in that when we're really kind of running short of time to be able to put that in place for the end of this month. Certainly doable, again, with respect to looking forward, if the directors would like to give staff that direction to do so. And we could certainly make sure that we bring something back to you in time to kind of look towards, kind of next year.
I'm going to put my support for Director Greaves' proposal. Looking at how much we are bringing in through that $19 parcel tax, it would take a good 10 years for us to save up enough money to currently buy properties of any sort of size in the Comox Valley, and I don't see it as a very effective number. Director Arbour, do you want to comment on this specific issue? Yeah, go ahead.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't vote for that, actually, in terms of adjusting it, for the very reason that I would rather 15 plus 25 is 40 plus 5 is 45,000. So I would rather add $19 to the other 20,000 properties in the Comox Valley. Right, we're currently undergoing a regional park service, which this kind of discussion is core to it. So before making meaningful changes with us and put more burden on rural taxpayers, I would like to see if the 20,000 properties in Comox, Cumberland, and Courtenay would actually chip in $19, because that would give us the scale that is needed to make projects like Stoughton Falls or whatever much more palatable, rather than to just rely on rural area voters. So I would ask for patience from all of us to see what is the outcome of the regional park study, whether there is appetite from the municipalities to take a more regional approach before we make a move. We've been patient for 10 years. The regional park study will be completed in the next few months. It's not a year that's going to make a huge difference, I think. So that'd be my sense. I have other things, but if you want to close this debate or put it as new business as a motion, that's up to the chair, I guess.
Maybe I'll just ask staff to comment regarding the Regional Park Service. Are you hearing, what level of support are you hearing from the other municipalities?
At this time, the consultant is working with staff from the municipalities in the regional district, and that was also presented to the CAOs. What is most likely is that a report will come forward to all the jurisdictions, proposing a budget for the service that will undertake the determination of priorities and whether there is the commitment on the part of the electorate to fund or support some level of community engagement. That's sort of where it's at. You won't see taxation this year for the purchase of parks. It's just too soon without knowing what the priorities may be. Mm-hmm. And I think CFO Jennifer Nelson might have something to add to this as well, in terms of a concern about acting on increasing this at this time. Jennifer, if you want to speak, please.
Sure. Thank you, through the CEO to the chair and directors. I just wanted to add that I do have some concerns with changing a parcel tax rate at this point in the statutory process and the financial planning process. I really don't see the capacity for us to be able to implement a changed rate and still meet our obligations on time to meet the process, the parcel tax process. So I just wanted to put that out there, and just I would have concerns with this changing at this moment, but certainly looking to review and bringing back something throughout this year in time for the next process would be realistic. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hearing that, Director Grieve, do you have anything further? I mean, I'm okay to wait if we have an assessment after we hear from our counterparts from the other municipalities. Maybe this is something that we can act on for 2023, but let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I understand, but you have to remember that the only time we get on a live discussion of some of these issues is at budget time, which is where we're at. So, if we go sleepily through to next February, it's not going to make any difference. I understand we do have a conversation coming up with the municipalities about how and when we can put together a regional service, and I think that's great. I'm willing to hold tough, but I would say that I would ask staff to bring this back well in advance of the next budget, so we can have an informed discussion before we're in the middle of budget cycle and it's too late to do something. Thank you.
Thanks. And perhaps, along Director Arbor's comment, we ask for a $25 contribution rather than a 19, so that we're all thinking about the same amount. If the rural areas were already contemplating moving it up, we should ask our counterparts to be at the same level. And then we don't have to go back again to us. So I think staff have heard it. Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. And obviously it's, I agree with Director Grieve. This is the time to talk about it. By the time it comes back, I would really want to understand the impact on the kind of opportunities we see. Because, if we did a motion on the fly today, would you ask for a tripling of the parcel tax, or would you ask for an extra $1 to take it to 20? And we don't have any basis right now for thinking about what we're seeing in the market. We don't have an analysis of the kind of needs. We could use some surrogates of important sales that we may have missed because we couldn't have the scale, but it feels like it would be rushed. So December 5th meeting of the ASC, right? So that's when we can schedule it. This is the first meeting after the election and ahead of budget time. Maybe we can see where the regional park thing lands and how the parcel tax works.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had a good discussion about this, and staff have heard some of the concerns from the directors. I had a question, Mark, around the fire service. In your report, you mentioned that you're proposing a funding level of 50,000 versus, I guess, the full-on 75,000. So could you describe exactly what that would look like?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, a full service would probably cost anywhere from 75,000 to 100,000. Before the COVID pandemic, we were paying over 100,000 for the service, but it was a little bit intermingled with operational dollars there as well. So what I tried to do is just really separate out the operational side from the beach fire side. So at 50,000, basically what we would no longer be getting would be the natural kind of programming that used to occur down there. And we would not be having service there in the mornings. So we used to have, like pre-COVID, we would have a contractor go down and make sure that there was bundles out in the mornings. So that would be pushed back to bundles kind of going out in the afternoons, and then we would have someone there kind of patrolling during the evening hours at supper time and to kind of close the park. So those times that we think are really critical to have someone there to be monitoring the program. So really trying to, I guess, trim the fat a little bit on that service, with still being able to kind of provide it. So just basically try to take a little bit of a fiscally responsible lens to that program.
Okay, if I can ask I'll ask a subsequent. My understanding for the history of this service was that it was brought in because fires were being lit illegally around Goose Pit. And I'm just wondering if staff could comment, are you aware of over the last 2 years when we didn't have this program, the level of illegal fires, and what staff are thinking about why bring it back, if we're not having a lot of illegal fires. So would you mind commenting to that?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately, I'm not probably the best person to answer the question in terms of the level of illegal fires. I would think that the Comox fire chief and the other fire chiefs would probably be best to answer that. From my kind of brief conversations I had with the Comox fire chief, I know that they did have some illegal fires elsewhere, and so I know the Comox chief is supportive of having the program at Goose Pit to kind of create that outlet for people to have beach fires. But again, I mean, it is a question for the electoral area directors to decide whether they want to financially support this program when it may be more of a regional service.
Well, that's exactly my point. I see calls for bringing it back, not from Area B residents, but from, more of our fellow residents in the municipalities. And for the electoral areas to bear the financial cost of that seems just like unfair. I have been contacted by a number of residents from the Croto Beach area who were absolutely horrified to hear that this service was going to be coming back, just because they've had 2 years of fairly smoke-free. I think one resident mentioned he might have seen 2 illegal fires over the last couple of years that he himself saw. But if we're not seeing a high number of illegal fires, I know changing of habits is so difficult in the community. And we now have this opportunity where habits have been changed forcefully because of COVID. To go back to something that was obviously causing a lot of harm to Area B residents primarily, they were shouldering the brunt of the air quality issues, seems like a missed opportunity. So I would like to put it out there to my fellow directors for us to not bring this service back and to continue what we've been doing with encouraging hibachi and propane fire rings to be brought from home, and enabling families to continue to use the beach, but not with burning wood. I'll turn it over to directors if they've got comments on that. Director Arbour.
Thanks. Yeah, I probably have questions and comments as well. Maybe Mark will have some answers, but I guess the fiscal component is top of mind because, currently the residents of Fannie Bay and Black Creek are paying for this service. And what I'm hearing from the Area B director is some of her residents anyways don't seem satisfied with that service. Do we have comparable services in Black Creek and Fannie Bay? Do our other parks, are they serviced by ring and firewood and the rest of it, or it's unique to Goose Pit? So that'd be my first question in looking at this. Mark?
Yeah, Madam Chair, in response to Director Arbour, we do usually we put out fire rings in Little River, and that's a program that is supported by BC Ferries on their BC Ferries lands. And then we do have fire rings at Joe Walker as well. And then we do have kind of fire structures at Joe Walker and at Royce and Seaside Trail.
And is it correct to say that the town of Comox forbids, has signs up at Cape Ladzo telling people not to have fires, that it's illegal there?
Madam Chair, to Director Arbour, I'm not aware of what their regulation is. Sorry.
Yeah, I am. I actually go to that park to walk sometimes. So Yeah, I don't know. It's just that consistency, and especially I would agree with Dr. Amir with the cost. And some of the complaints that she is hearing. I'd be prepared to help her, but I also want to acknowledge something that happened, which is on December 17th, we did receive a letter from the town of Comox, and on this matter, which was requesting the CVRD to restore the program. I guess what it's made me realize, aside from the topic itself, is we don't do the best job of having correspondence hit the table, right? So we don't have a standing item in our agenda that even says correspondence where we can actually pull item from, because I think that's relevant to the topic at hand in the sense that there was a discussion between the town of Comox that went to CVRD board, but it wasn't referred through to EASC as consideration. And the letter was basically that, a letter from the town of Comox requesting that we reestablish the program. And that's why I started looking at it a little closer to say, well, if town of Comox wants it, they can do it at Cape Ladzo, so to speak, right? They could just set up a program. But for me, it goes back to that fiscal piece, which is, you know, I do agree with Director Grieve and Director Hamir that this is, I saw you nodding, that this is a service that benefits mostly nearby residents in the town of Comox, which is probably why council asked for us to look at it. They're not contributing. I agree that the regional park service would be a great place to have those conversations. And in the meantime, I have a hard time telling people in Fannie Bay and Union Bay that they are paying for a service at Loose Pit. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. Director Grieve?
Well, some may recall that I was one of the fiercest advocates for supplying clean, dry alder as opposed to wet cedar and yellow cedar and whatever they were pulling off the beach at the time, because it was, talk about harm reduction, was definitely reducing the harm. Now, I know that there's certain elected officials who are no longer elected officials that have differing views of how this came about. But it was at a request of some of the neighbors because of the bad quality of fire. People were actually burning construction materials and you know, throw a little arborite in there to see what it smells like. It was really bad. So I think maybe that behavior hasn't returned. Some of it is possible. Now, times change, and I'm the first to admit that. And I think that much like the conversation we're going to be having next week around the Saratoga campsite, there's no fire rings. Rationale is that people pretty well all have their little propane rings nowadays. It's fairly commonplace. A friend of mine took his motorhome right across Canada, and he loaded it up on firewood. He brought it all back because there was no place he could burn it along the way. Everybody has it, use their little propane rings. So maybe there's time to reassess this. You know, I think it's important that when presented with new information, you reconsider. And in this case, I'd rather that money go into our park acquisition function. Case in point. So, you know, unless Comox is going to be coming through with some money to help support the fire warden or what have you. I mean, it is their fire protection area. So, you know, I don't think it's going to be a huge burden in 2022 to bring your fire ring down to the beach. So I would actually support redirecting that money back into in the park budget. Seeing as though we're not really in a position to increase our requisition in parks, although I think it's sorely needed. So I would be willing to forfeit the fire ring program in light of the fact that propane fire rings are vastly superior in this day and age.
Thanks, Director Grieve. Do the directors have any other comments? Yeah, Director River.
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion. And the other piece that was on my mind, which I have to you have to forgive me. I actually have no awareness of that. So if I speak naively, so be it. But I did think about whether Comox First Nation were using the area to have fires as well, and whether we wanted to do a touch base, because I know they go to Goose Pit and maybe at the far section. Sorry, it's not my area, so I don't know if there's a practice or whatever that we wanted to do a touch base with them on this, but if not, I'm seeing not a lot of nods. Then I think I would support Director Greaves' proposal, maybe under new business. And the question to staff is, could we have a motion to actually create that savings and allocate those funds into our park acquisition fund?
Kevin, do you want to comment on the ability to tax other than the parcel tax or provide funds to the park acquisition funds in another means, either through budget or otherwise?
Sure, through the chair to the director. So, within respect of this particular proposed financial plan, if the directors, we're looking to direct staff to reallocate the $50,000 that's currently been identified within the operational financial plan to instead go to a reserve contribution, say the Parks Acquisition Reserve Fund. I mean, certainly that's within your purview, and you can certainly direct us to do so. And then that would just get reflected in a subsequent version of the financial plan, being the recommended budget.
Great. Thanks, Kevin, for that. Are there any other comments on the report, Director Arbour?
Thank you. Switching gear, and that's my last one. So in terms of, we have got some capital projects. We did Fannie Bay and Area A last year, and we have nothing in 2022 for Area A. We have the dike, we have Morse Hill. Anyways, there's 3 projects in Area B and C. I'm totally fine with it because we did some good work in Area A the last year or two. But I would just like to make a comment, and Elena is here as well. That I do ask myself, and Mark, obviously, I do ask myself the question around our September active transportation plan and how we're going about prioritizing it and the relationship between the active transportation, the planning department, and the parks. Because, if I was going to get super ambitious, I would say for the basket of Area A, we did have some discussions around prioritizing a couple of projects, which were but I don't know if that landed like solidly inside staff. So both of them are multi-use project. One was the sort of Union Bay waterfront, the 1 kilometer section at an outrageous cost of 2.3 million. So this one I imagine will require some collaboration with Ministry of Transportation and, et cetera. The other one, which is more manageable, is the Royston sort of McLeod to, not McLeod, I'm thinking of Union Bay now, Marine Drive to Livingston, and the walkability and that entire area, which has been awkward for a long time. But I'm not sure. I know that the Parks is gonna apply for an active transportation grant for Denman. I'm just not sure what we're thinking about in terms of the application for Area A, B, and C. I'm mostly interested in Area A, obviously, but are we doing a roadmap of those projects? Like, when I was talking about the terminal development for BC Ferries earlier, they've mapped out, we're going to do Hornby in 2027, we're going to do Quadra in 2030. Like, do we try to pre-plan some budget allocation towards those projects, or are some so infinitely minimal that we can't even really think that way because the size of the projects we've identified in the active transportation plan is so huge?
Madam Chair, Alana Mullally has joined us at the table and can respond to the active transportation and where things are at with that. And I don't know whether you want to follow up, Mark, in terms of your own planning and community parks initiatives that might not fall into active transportation formally, but are adding to the complement of improvements such as Director Arbour spoke. So first we'll go to Alana.
Thank you very much, Russell. Through Madam Chair. You're right, Director Arbour, the network plan that was presented to you this past fall, it shows that almost like a shopping list of all of the potential. And that was based on the feedback that we got from the community engagement. But that next step of prioritization is really important. So that September resolution that you're referencing included a line that we would work with our municipal partners, the Minister of Transportation and Comox First Nation, to go through that exercise. One of the initial pieces of that is just finding out where are some of the DCC projects that are coming ahead in the next couple of years, like looking for those pieces that could be those potentially easier routes or faster routes. And one of the first ones we've identified, for example, with the Ministry of Transportation, is because they're doing some works in Area B. So we said, okay, let's do that. But you're right, there is a priority piece. And so when we come back to you with the RGS budget, one of the 2022 work plan items is to have those conversations with the different partners and set to some prioritization. And then on this piece with Mark, we are working closely with Mark's group and watching that regional greenways conversation unfold. But even just at the staff level, making sure that when Mark's team is putting the applications together, that there is some awareness about, and there is, I mean, we all are working very closely. Mark, would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you, Alana. Yeah, I concur with Alana. I think between the planning and the parks group, we're having lots of good conversations on how we can kind of go about actually implementing the active transportation plan. So right now we're really trying to kind of figure that out. Parks is still kind of working on making sure that we work towards those kind of shorter, smaller community linkages. And providing those to the residents. And as Alana alluded to, I think there is a conversation to be had around the regional park service as well, and whether some of those kind of key connections between our core communities can be provided through that service.
Sorry, you have a subsequent director?
Yeah, budget's meant to have good discussions, and thank you for splitting up the two meetings. Our Chair Amir, we would have been here a long time last week. Yeah, thank you for those insights, because I'll just raise the concern. You can probably already anticipate what I'll say, but if the active network transportation discussions specifically occur in the RGS context, what's likely to happen with all these different partners at the table is, for example, the connectivity on the roadside between Cumberland and Courtney and Area A will get prioritized, right? And so for me, the Union Bay would be at the bottom of the list, because I would be the only person advocating for it in a very multi-stakeholder table. The Park Service is still controlled by the rural area, so that's why I'm curious to see where we can find synergy and we have more control around what projects move forward. Because otherwise, I really feel that the logic will dictate on an RGS uptake that you will go from the center out, right? From the center of the municipalities out. That's where you get your best bang for the buck. But you may not increase necessarily the livability of the rural communities where we also have those prioritized projects. And I realize that not all of those will also have a parks lens, right? So when you talk about roadside stuff, I could see the waterfront of Union Bay being a park, some kind of license or something like that. Like we know Qualicum Beach and stuff like that, but the Royston one would probably never be a park. It could become part of the Royston Seaside Trail, maybe as a continuation of that, but just some things in mind. I realize there's nothing on the books for the year. I just want to say I am supportive of the projects on the book in Area B and C. They're really great. But thank you for clarifying how staff is thinking about it.
Do directors have any other comments or questions on the rest of the report? Mark, I just had one comment. I'm looking at the capital projects and I'm seeing a nice slant for Area B, so I want to thank you for that. The Lazo Greenway construction, I think we talked about this like many years ago, and I was under the impression that we had already put some budget aside for that. So am I thinking wrong that that some of the work did happen over COVID, but I had thought that budget was already set aside? Do staff want to comment on that? Because I understood we were going to actually start with the actual pathway this year.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much for that. that observation. So we have put money towards the designs. That design still is ongoing. We just recently received the 50% design drawings, and we want to get to a point where we can apply for an AT grant by the end of March. So we're kind of pushing forwards on those designs. And the idea would be if we were to get an active transportation grant, then we could kind of push forward with doing construction starting this year. And again, it is a partnership program with Comox, and they're on board and on the same kind of timeline. The 250,000, I mean, and maybe Kevin can jump in on this, but I believe that's a carry forward from Community Works Funds grants. Kevin?
Yes, through the chair of the directors, I believe Mark is correct. So, what we often do is, towards the end of the year, if we, become aware that a project has not yet been completed or perhaps not yet started, then we would carry those forward into the subsequent year. And so there are a number of community work fund commitments that have been carried forward into the 2022 financial plan.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. So I'll call the question on receipt. On receipt, all in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And would someone like to move a recommendation? Sorry.
No, happen to have the red light. Yeah, I'll move the recommendation with the exception of the Goose Spit firing program, that we allocate that money into the park acquisition budget, and also that well, that's not part. I'll leave the rest of it for a motion later on in new business.
Thanks.
I'm seconded.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Seconded by Director Arbour. Any other comments on that motion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you for that, Mark. All right, item number 6, the Vancouver Island Regional Library Participation Function 630. Moved and seconded.
Thank you, Chair and Directors, and Kevin Devell will speak quietly to the Vancouver Island Regional Library function.
Libraries aren't quiet anymore. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you very much, through the chair to the director. So yes, one final budget for your consideration today, and that is for the Vancouver Island Regional Library Contribution Service. So hopefully everybody can see the slide in front of you here, and bear with me. Okay, is everybody able to see the slide?
Yes, we are. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So quickly, just as a bit of a refresher on the nature of this service. So of course, this service was established back in 1995. And obviously the purpose of the service is to provide a contribution towards our participation within the Vancouver Island Regional Library District. This service is funded almost exclusively by tax requisition. And as indicated on the slide there, the tax rate for 2022 is 0.1264 per thousand of assessed value, of course, versus 0.1669 in 2021, based on, again, the assessments of the day that we've talked about previously. So for a home assessed at $600,000, that 2022 tax impact would be just under $76. And of course, just quick reminder that all 3 electoral areas fully participate within this service. And so, as I'm sure you're all aware, the way the regional library district allocates their annual levies is it's done on a kind of a 50-50 portion formula. It's based 50% on population and 50% on assessment. And so what happens is they kind of look at that in conjunction with all of the other jurisdictions that pay into the regional library district over the course of the year, and then kind of allocate that out accordingly. So as I've indicated on this slide, the population levy for the 3 CVRD electoral areas has increased by about 0.5% from 2021. And that's versus about 1.6% across all the VIRL's service areas. With respect to the assessment levy component, the levy for the CVRD electoral areas in 2022 has increased by 5.74%. versus about 4.46% across, again, the entire library service area. And it's important to note that given the early nature of when the VRL sets their budget, which is usually early in the fall, around September, the assessments, of course, would be based on a review based on likely the 2021 revised roll. And then they would look at, again, all of the changes across all the various jurisdictions and then determine, based on the requisition that they're requiring, what each of those requisitions would be required to pay. Again, the regional library does prepare an annual 5-year financial plan similar to what we do as a regional district. And that's, of course, sets the levies for each of the municipalities and regional districts that pay into the library service. That, as I just noted, the financial plan was adopted back on September 25th of 2021. And I've provided just a quick URL there in case anybody would like to go and take a look directly at their full financial plan and all of the ancillary materials that come along with that. And lastly, just a quick overview of the budget. So, of course, given largely the operational increase is largely the levy to the regional hospital district, that has led to almost a corresponding increase in the requisition by about $51,000. That's been tempered a little bit by some available surplus from the past year, so it's not exactly a one-to-one increase, but it's pretty comparable. And that's all I've got for this service. More than happy to answer any questions.
Great. Director Arbor, I hope you've got some input as our library rep.
Thanks, Kevin. Really good survey of the VRL budget. I have to say I was a little worried about our, like before January, about our increases reported in our different areas, but evidently everybody went up across Vancouver Island as well, so the hit is not so bad. Yeah, it's so I by the way, I didn't end up submitting my name. I was vice chair last year, but I didn't put my name up this year. And so we have Gabby Wickstrom returning as chair, and as new vice chair is Erin Emmons from the NIMO, which is the largest service participant in this in the VRL system. I saw in the staff note that you're right that we suspended. One thing I'm proud of that we did last year is noticing the cost of construction and all those different things, even though I'm sure Director Gray can say, well, it always goes up anyways, eventually, but everything seemed so overheated last year that we decided to suspend our capital projects for a year. But this year we're actually gonna restart in terms of looking at new projects. In that optic, there's actually, I'm having a tiny bit of traction around, and I want to thank, I mean, it wasn't a great effort by staff of the CVRD, but a little bit of support in the sense that there's a little bit of traction around the potential for a new library in Branch and Indian Bay. There was a good meeting between the school district and the Vancouver Island Library, and I talked to our new CAO a couple of weeks ago, and there's openness. So that's all that's needed, you know. The Union Bay has the smallest library in the entire system at 300 square foot, and so it really stands out. And so I'll continue to pursue those discussions. And yeah, apparently the management team at the school district were open to having more conversations. So that's really great. And lastly, I know it doesn't affect us, but I know for Area C, Area B, a lot of people do use the municipal libraries. And I'd just like to report, you know, the Courtney branch was delayed in terms of the renovation, but it finally should start in the next few months here. Thanks.
Thanks. Do we have, no. Oh, we're not going to go to Director Grieve then. I don't see any other comments on the report. So on receipt then, all in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously. We have a recommendation to approve the financial plan for function 630. Moved. And I can second. And any comments? All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And we've got a new item under new business, the support for the Beulah Creek Village Affordable Housing Project on Hornby Island for receipt. Moved and seconded, and I will turn it over to Director Arbor if you want to comment.
Thank you, and maybe our CEO will have comments as well, but I'll try to be short and comprehensive at the same time. So in case you didn't read the report, I'm sure you did, but basically Hornby Island got approved for a $2.6 million grant in 2018, plus consideration of financing for the rest of the project by BC Housing. There's been some delays, including a court case, which was won by the Housing Society, and also basically COVID. Let's just put it to that. They have incurred so far $500,000 in pre-development costs, so it is progressing between BC Housing. Macola is actually the outfit that is putting the project together and would be the operator for the long term. Over the last few months, though, with the cost of construction, there's been concerns, which frankly I'm a bit disappointed with, because there is so much money at the feds and the province that is having trouble finding its way out the door. And so here we have a project that, you know, is on a good track. But what we're hearing more and more is that, as we know in all of our projects, the different orders of government want to confirm that local government are supportive and maybe contributing. We saw it with the internet project on Hornby and Denman. It was not 100% funding. They did 90-10. So this one is actually to try to, there's three requests that I have for us today. One is to consider what is in the scope of BC Housing a nominal contribution to the project to really clearly identify that support and partnership from local government. So that's a request for contribution from Community Works funds, which I guess we could ask staff to really do the due diligence in the next, the next week or before financial planning is complete around it. The second is looking at, you've heard me speak on that at least 5 or 10 times over the last 3 years, to initiate the feasibility for housing service, recognizing that the islands are not part of the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. Therefore, that's usually where the funds would come from for something like this. And lastly, that we refer this to the CVRD board to write a general letter of support to the project, to confirm that the CVRD board is behind this project, and to BC Housing, and then encourage them to put shovel in the ground, essentially. So those are my 3 requests for today. I wouldn't make that request if I hadn't heard from BC Housing that these actions could actually make the difference in terms of ensuring that the project actually proceeds.
Thanks. Staff want to comment?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think these are recommendations that the Electoral Area Service Committee would make to the board. In advance of the board considering the matters, we will confirm whether the proposal qualifies with Community Works funds, and also probably suggest that if they do, MOU memorandum of understanding would be established, such as we have had with other non-regional district groups that use the funds. And we'll consider the ability to undertake the feasibility study and with respect to other work plan items and bring that back for the EA directors to consider. So no problems with you considering and adopting these. We'll help to provide more information before the ultimate commitments are made.
Great, thank you for that comment. You know, we've done our housing needs assessment, and for the most part, our affordable housing is concentrated in the municipality, so that people have access to services and the infrastructure that's available in municipalities. I think, though, for Hornby and Denman, that's a very different issue, because they're not going to necessarily leave the island for affordable housing. So I support Director Arbor's requests. Thank him for thinking of the creative way of making this happen and connecting with BC Housing. And yeah, I don't have any other comments, but thanks to the to our CEO for highlighting the issue that the feasibility study may require, staff time, and that may or may not happen. Back to Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. Based on those two comments, one is I appreciate staff looking into number one, which is probably the eligibility and the MOU. Those are all good ideas. I would mention, I'm sure you will think of it, but a bit like we did with the fire hall, you could specify the amounts for a component of the project. So for example, for the water system or something like that. And actually, I like the idea of the water system because, we might have Chris LaRose have a little look at it as well, or something like a bit of in-kind accompanying. And in terms of the feasibility, you're right that this is maybe, I think the cash amount is probably what is going to generate conversation both in the community and at this table. But in my mind, recommendation 2 is actually the more substantive one. I think I have mentioned that in an ideal world, I would love to see a question on the ballot at the election to Hornby and Denman. I was contacted over the weekend because people did see the agenda for Beulah Creek, and there is a senior housing development, Pepper Lane on Denman Island, that's been advancing, as well as Denman Green. And of course, they were inquiring how can we access resources. So I said, I'll have a conversation with them, and because I think, as our CEO mentioned before, if housing is among the top 1, 2, or 3 priorities on the islands, at some point you need consideration of a service so that we can appropriately consider it and put it to the electorate. And that's what I would like to do. I think the chair is right that my vision is that we did that with the economic development function in 2008 when the islands left the service. A contractor was hired by the regional district at the time to do a feasibility, engage with the stakeholders. It was not as comprehensive a piece as some of the pieces we work on here, but I think with a small budget, we could probably put something together. And I'm not looking to, to go absolutely crazy on this, but I think there's a gap in terms of resources available for housing projects on the island or meeting the 200 homes goals that Hornby and Denman have in terms of affordable housing target. So, yeah, thank you. I'll stop talking. I could talk about this obviously for hours because dear to my heart, the housing on the islands, but I'll pass it back to my directors and see if they're willing to support.
Thanks. Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it goes without doubt that things are different on the island. They don't have access to a lot of things we take for granted over here. Housing, of course, is now becoming more and more a local government issue, even though I think it originally started out as a federal one. So it's kind of reached the end of its journey. So, but to be not disingenuous here, I think that it behooves senior government to stump up for this stuff. If they're going to finance local government and work through local government, and the way that we work through our nonprofits and our societies to make things happen, then that's the model we're left with here. So that's what we have to work with. Obviously, somebody has to get the ball rolling, and I think it's whether or not this model translates into stuff we could be doing here. Well, obviously it does. There were a lot of initiatives that we're involved with at local government level, are actually, like I say, more provincial mandate stuff. So, we have to do what we have to do. You have to get the job done somehow. So I'll be supporting Director Arbor on this.
Right, thanks. I don't see any other lights up, so we'll vote on receipt. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And we have some requested actions.
Move on.
Requested action's been moved. I can second. Any discussion on the commitment of $100,000 from the Hornby Denman Community Works funds?
I think it's fine because you're making a recommendation to the board. So, yeah.
Okay, great. So any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Item number 2, requested action 2. Move and seconded. And any comments, Director Arbor?
So coming back, I mean, we had a very honest discussion at our board meeting a week or 2 ago. So in terms of capacity of staff to take on a feasibility like that and oversee it and hire somebody or whatever, does staff anticipate that this is possible to envision having this? And I don't assume that there would be a positive recommendation, because one of the options would be don't pursue a service, right? But is it feasible? I know I had that conversation with Jake at one point. It's a bit like the union-based stuff, like you backtrack from the election to here, and you need your bylaws and all that stuff. So is it staff's opinion right now that this is too much to ask, or is this something that is feasible?
It's feasible, but it will likely mean redefining priorities that might be on the books right now, right? So I think we will come back to you at the EA directors and say, this takes these resources of our organization right now. Those resources are applied to these other 3 or 4 projects. What are your priorities, right? It might be that hard decision, or maybe there is the capacity, but we will put our minds to what's required to get this on the ballot and what needs to be done in order to get that done, and whether we have the capacity. And if we don't, then what do you choose amongst the various other ideas that are on the table now?
That's very fair.
Any other comments? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. And requested action number 3. Moved by Director Grieve. Second, Director Arbor, and comments from Director Arbor.
Just working out the details here on the motions. If staff finds it helpful, I could potentially, what I didn't do in my report is produce a potential draft for BC Housing. If that relieves some of the pressure, I'd be happy to work on that in the next couple of days.
Thank you very much for the offer. I think we have it in hand. Alana has made contact with with BC Housing, and we'll probably know just what the sweet spots are for the language within that letter should the board adopt this at the next meeting.
Great, thank you. No other comments? All those in favor then? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. Director Grieve, you have a new item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under new business, I'd like to propose a motion that we set in play a review of planning fees for, I guess it'd be for 2023.
Okay, I will second that.
Yeah, and with the purpose to obviously bring them into modern times and reflect the fact that it's not the general public that are using the service, and it should be paid for more by the people that actually are allocating the staff time and all the efforts and the money from the CVRD. So it's more equitable and distributed amongst, like I say, the people who are actually benefiting from the service.
Thank you. Director Arbor?
Thanks. I will vote in favor, but I'll make some comments as well. A bit like remuneration, right, of civil servants and elected officials. I think it could be a very brief report. We've already heard that we are, this is contributing to 2 or 4% of our budget. So maybe a component of the report would be just a quick survey of what other places around us is doing, whether we're aligned with that, and then that would provide at that time a sound basis. If we want to go well above, if we want a target of 10% of our budget comes from fees and permits, that's our purview. But if we find out that the average across all regions is like 2%, then we will hear from constituents as well. So I would just say it'd be great to have a comparative component to that report.
Thank you. And I don't know if this makes too much of an impact, but obviously when application fees increase, that does impact the cost of housing. I'm not really sure if that makes a huge difference on affordable housing, but I mean, I'd love to hear just staff's comments on what impacts of increasing the application fees may or may not have on affordability, if that's a.
Elena, do you want to comment on that? Thank you very much.
Through Madam Chair to the directors, I think that's something that we hear from the development community when fees increase, that there's the automatic correlation between the affordability and the fees. I'm not sure that that happens here in our economy, but it's something we could look to. Not to make this project bigger, but I would suggest that application fees are one little piece of the pie of development paying for itself. So if the idea is that you're looking for development to pay for itself, you might also consider the impact of parcel taxes and development cost charges and application fees are small. And to Director Arbor's point, I would say that we are on par with the other local governments, relative to where our fees sit. And certainly our member municipalities, we are very similar. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve.
Yes, thank you. I would just add that in the big picture, when you take a look at the increase once again on property prices and on building supplies, that it's really not proportionate. And I think it should be. I don't think it should be something that we should subsidize from general revenue. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think, just to make my point clear, I actually don't think it makes a huge difference on affordability when you have a house that's, $500,000-$600,000, $1,500 application fees. Not really, it's a drop in the bucket, really. So yeah, thank you for that. I don't see any other lights on. So on that motion that was put forward by Director Reed, I just want to double check. Lisa, you've got the wording? Yeah. Okay. So review of planning. The review of planning fees for 2023. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Do we have any other items under new business? I don't see any. So I will entertain a motion to terminate. Oh. All right. So the motion to hold on.
I knew I had something, and sorry, I missed it. Can I actually just request an action or motion that the ESC committee answers the letter from the town of Comox regarding Goose Pit? And in that letter, we explain our rationale and basically next steps that could be considered, regional park service, all these kinds of things.
I will second that. Do any of the directors have comments? Director Grieve?
My question would be through the staff. If we aren't paying for a custodian or a security person or a park warden or whatever, then it probably falls to the Comox Fire Department, does it not? To police
Our bylaws.
the burning of unlawful fires in that area.
Mark, can you respond to that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, to Director Grieve. We do have contractors on site that would be there to notify us in case there were illegal fires down there, and then we would then look to the Comox Fire Chief for assistance on that. But by not having the fire program, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have contractors there on site on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that might be an issue of contention. I don't know how we can address it, but if we do have our contracted services there, and maybe they could keep an eye on it once a day or something if the patrols will do that. Because I don't want to leave Comox high and dry on this either. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a societal shift to move over to propane rings, but to me, it seems like one of those no-brainers that would probably take a year to shift and everybody be on board. So, I think we have to respectfully explain to Comox Council that, that this is 2022, and although technically propane is a greenhouse gas or the greenhouse gas emitting substance, it does not send out PM 2.5, which is what we're looking at. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Grieve. So I think the letter will also hopefully to Mark's comments, it will describe what we do have in place in terms of contractors watching. So I think that will be helpful. Any other comments on that letter to respond to the town of Comox? Okay. And Lisa, you're okay with the motion? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Termination has been moved. Seconded. Anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you, everybody.